Booting up. Booting up. I think it's going. All right, here we go. Enable or start the webinar.
Are we live? Are we live?
We should be live.
Excellent.
Or not, because I missed a button. Now we're going to be live.
Now
There we go.
all right.
I dismissed the button instead of hitting a button.
Okay.
So
We're about to start in about a minute. So welcome to the House of Blue Team track 2. If you're looking for track 1, well, that's another track. You need to go over there. So if you're looking for Jonathan Rogers, he's over in track 1. You need to get the link for that. But over here, like I said, in the House of Blue Team, we have myself, Ian Meyer, Ryan, the shootist, making sure we look good and sound good. And coming up next, we have Craig Bowser, who's going to talk to us about their talk, Baby Steps to the Future, Evolving into the Next Gen SOC, which should be pretty good. But before we get started, just a couple housekeeping notes, show notes, whatnot at this here Blue Team Summit. We're going to save questions till the end. Craig's got a power-packed kind of talk here that might go right up to the end. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat in Zoom or in Discord, preferably in Discord, so you can hang out with other folks. You can go to our Antisyphon training Discord right now at discord.gg/Antisyphon. Those links are in the chat and comments and wherever Ryan's put them, but I'm sure he's put them in plenty of places.
I'm about to put them in the chat here on Zoom.
Now. Very good. So get into our Antisyphon Discord. When you get in there, you'll find August 2023 Summit and Track 2 Summit, or Summit Track 2. That's where we are today. So come hang out, ask questions, talk to other folks that are engaged in the summit. And if we do not get the time to do questions, Craig's let us know that he's going to jump into that track after the fact and answer your questions for you and chat with you about what they got going on here. So we are right at 11:30, and thank you for joining us for a Blue Team Summit. I really wanted to do more of a background for the House of Blues and the House of Blue Team, but that doesn't matter because we got a lot of great blue teamers, red teamers, every kind of teamer that you can think of. We have no blues music that I know of, and you all know me at this point. I'm Ian Meyer, and I just cannot resist props and costumes. So I'll be playing the role of Jake Blues today with my rounder belly. That said, Craig Bowser's here. He's going to talk to us for the next 30 minutes about baby steps to the future, evolving into the next gen SOC. So a little bit about Craig real quick as I play hype man for him. They are, that's what I should do. I should just come out as hype man.
There you go.
Yeah. They're an InfoSec professional with 20 years of experience. After serving in the Air Force as a communications officer, they moved into information security as a manager, security engineer, security analyst, and then also other various positions, including information systems security officer for the DoD, DOJ, and Department of Energy contractors. They're currently at Guidepoint as a senior security architect. And we were talking just before we started that I've used Guidepoint a lot, know a lot of good people there. So definitely check them out if you've got needs that we can't fulfill here at Black Hills and Antisyphon. So he's spoken at Black Hat, DerbyCon, multiple B-sides, multiple SAN summits, has CISSP, all these kinds of great things, and is a father, Christian, husband, geek, scout leader, excellent, woodworking, definitely need to talk about that, and into sci-fi, hiking, and home networking. So yeah, you've got a lot of open projects, don't you, Craig?
I do. I don't know if it's on that bio, but one of my bios does say that I have more to-do things than I have to-do slots.
Yes, yeah, and he has more to-do items than open to-do slots. Yep, yeah, definitely. Ryan, who are you talking to? Craig?
No, you. Boost your volume just a little bit.
Volume. Yeah. Okay, very good. Well, you don't need to hear from me anymore because, Craig, I'm going to hand it over to you. We can see your slides, and we can't wait to hear what you have to say. Anyone who has questions, throw them in the Discord. I'll be watching in the background. We'll drop off camera. Craig,
appreciate it for us. Awesome, guys. Thanks for the intro. Definitely. I really love being able to do this talk. This is sort of a passion of mine. I've been in security for a while, and as they said, I'm here to talk about baby steps to the next gen SOC. Now, I know some of you saying, why are we talking about the SOC? The SOC is dead. But I'm going to really kind of try and shift your view on that and say the SOC is not dead, but it really is evolving. It's changing through really the environment that we are forced to participate in, we're forced to monitor, we're forced to protect. And what does that mean? Well, if you think about the history, and I understand the history of security may actually, I've been in this for a while, so it may actually predate some of you, but that's all right. We're talking about going way back when our environment was relatively simple, at least compared to what it is now. We had a basic castle and moat architecture where we had that hard, crunchy outside. All of our protections were on the perimeter, and everything on the inside was that soft and chewy, and I can go anywhere, do anything. We had relatively few security tools. We were, as far as the attacks, by today's standards, they're relatively simple, but back then they were fairly effective. And so as we moved through time, you see we moved from on-prem, we started having some remote abilities. Cloud started to come into account, started to really be built. We had more tools, and we moved into more of a defense in depth architecture. We had layers of security. It wasn't just the perimeter, but then we had the DMZ. We had some protections around some of our data, some of our more valuable applications. We may have started segmenting our networks at a high level. So then, even and that enabled better protection, better monitoring. But then, as our technologies advanced, as our capabilities and skills advanced, and our understanding of what we needed as attacks matured and became better, we are moving again to the next model of defense, the next defensive architecture kind of capability process, if you will, and that's sort of a zero trust. Whatever that looks like in your environment, that's where networks, that's where enterprises, that's where the architecture is really moving to. And we have more tools that we are now able to use to defend our networks, to monitor our networks. And we have additional elements that we have to protect and defend: mobile, OT, as all of those capabilities get pulled under the umbrella of the things that are critical to our networks, critical to our operations. That is, all of those things are really important that tie into that. So what is the challenge? The challenge is that our SOC, if we have, whatever SOCs we have, they are still stuck in the structure of the last decade, of the last 15 years, where we have a sort of a centralized hub. It could be a SIM, but a centralized place where the logs are coming in, where our monitoring tools and our alerts are going from a number of different sources. We have this setup where we have tiers of analysts that are doing sort of a pass the buck, not in terms of yes, in terms of responsibility, but not in the sense of an irresponsible that responsibility, but in the sense of, hey, I did my part, now your turn, now your turn, now your turn, of what is going on and taking things, So this is where many of our SOCs are still today. Now, there are some SOCs that have really changed with the times, and that's great. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But by and large, this is how we think of a SOC. Well, the challenges that come with the change in our environment are not, we are not able to really meet with this SOC. So what does that look like? What are some of those challenges? Well, there's a lack of personnel. All right, I don't have to tell you that. That was easy. That's low-hanging fruit. But we are really, one of the things you may have really conceptualized is that increasingly complex security stack has really pushed the limits of what that SOC in this structure is able to monitor, respond, and analyze. And so that's really pushing the boundaries of the capabilities of that structure. Additionally, we have a limited visibility into an increasing attack surface. We just aren't able to monitor and watch every location we need to monitor and watch, and it continues to grow and become, expand as to the different locations that can be attacked. We can't, that SOC structure with the tools and the personnel really cannot operate at scale to handle better attacks and higher volumes. So that is another challenge that structure is facing. And we still have this age-old dilemma, this age-old conflict, this age-old push and pull, where we're trying to balance compliance with best practices, with effective security and operations, not to mention business and all the other factors that go into being effective for the organization. And attackers have shifted their primary targets. Back when I first started this, their primary targets, attackers were looking to get access to servers. They were looking to get access to devices, because owning a device, owning the domain controller, while still a valuable target today, right? That's still the keys to the kingdom. But it was also web servers. Oh, I own the web server, or I own the database server, or the firewall. Those were valuable targets. But today, if I can't get access to the domain controller, but I can get access to all your identities, then that's fine. I don't have to own the server itself. Or I get access to your data. Well, that's great. Those are the valuable things that are far more targeted than just a physical device. So how did we get to this spot? How did we get to where we are now? Several things. First, the first things that really stand out in my mind are the fact that operations shifted to a cloud and a DevOps capability. When SOCs were first coming around and security was really becoming an actual kind of consideration in development and in operations, security often became the roadblock. And that was good and bad. It was bad because it slowed things down. It was good because security was able to really say, hey, we should make sure that this application has security built in, and there are considerations, and fix this cross-site scripting area or injection attack path. And so that was great, but it slowed production down, it slowed operations down, it slowed development down. And when operations and DevOps came about, they needed to move fast. You're putting out 2, 3, you guys know this, I'm not telling you anything you aren't aware of. When they have to put out 4 or 5 different versions a day, you can't have security sitting there going, nope, I need a day of testing, or I need a week of testing to verify that that version meets the security. It doesn't work like that, not in a manual process anyway, because a lot of that DevOps, as you know, is automated. Security was way behind getting into that automation. And additionally, the move to remote anywhere, anytime access, suddenly we as security no longer had control over either devices that were being used to access, or the environment within the access was being provided. We couldn't control the coffee shops and the libraries and the hotels, much less bring devices that were involved with BOIOD. And so those shifts really made security challenging, because we no longer were able to put our hands in all the environments we wanted to. Hey, some good news, security did get better, but you know what, so did our attackers. And so that necessitated a different approach to many things. And as such, tools and methodologies have increased in number and thus complexity, as we built more tools to handle better attackers and more complex environments. But that also meant the amount of tools that we're monitoring and using have also increased, right? You think about, back, 10, 15 years ago, how many tools did we have on the network? We had like a firewall, an IDS, an antivirus, but right, we had maybe half or fewer or a quarter of the tools that we have now. And I think one of the big challenges that we are trying to adapt as a mindset is that we are no longer operating in the assumption that that a network can be unhackable. We are now in the assumed compromise, and that mindset, one of several mindsets that are out there, is really important to understand the difference in what we're doing. So what's the solution? Hey, spoiler alert, it's in my title, and we need to become next gen. But What does that mean? It's a buzzword. So let's put some handles on that buzzword. Let's put some something that we can really carry around. So one big thing is that when you're next gen, you're shifting your strategy. And this isn't just a security view, it's a whole environment, a whole organizational change where you're moving from the defense in depth, or the expense in depth is the joke because it costs so much to do this. We're moving from that to zero trust. And you're building resilience in your networks. You're not only saying, hey, zero trust, which at its foundation is I don't trust anything. So any interaction from any user, any device, to any data, and to any application, every access, every interaction, I want authentication and authorization checked every time. That's zero trust. I no longer trust you just because you've authenticated once. You need to authenticate every time. And you're doing it with resilience built into your network. That is, your environment should be able to operate even while under or during an attack, at least the essential or the critical components. So then you're able to, when you have that, the next part of being next gen is that routine things are just handled automatically. And that can include being where alerts and in events are automatically enriched and triaged. And those alerts and events and the automation is constantly being updated and tuned. You're not just putting out an alert. You're not just writing alert, putting it into production and going, oh, we're done. You are reevaluating maybe once or twice a week, just like DevOps is constantly putting out new versions and patches on a consistent basis. We're doing that in security with alerts and responses and automated responses, because just as the need for applications need constant upgrades for minor, consistent minor improvements, so do our detections and responses need to do the same. Logs and events are ingested from a variety of places, but really one of the other things is we really start leaning into machine learning and AI to force multiply what we have. We're using that to help capture advanced threats and attackers and do things like, and I'll talk about this more, where we're using it to help our analysts in ways that are more than just querying ChatGPT. So how do we do that? Now, as I get into the next steps here, I want to make sure that I say, hey, look, this is not a one size fits all. Everybody has to do this. I tried to break these steps and these concepts into phases with certain steps in each phase, but I understand not everybody is going to be able to do all of these things. And some of you may already have some or many of these things done. The goal here is to provide a conceptual, progressive a flow, so that you can say, oh, these are some things I should do or I could do to help move me to the next step. And not so much the order of which that I present them, but how they are appropriate to your environment to help you improve and advance and evolve your SOC. So the way I broke down this, in my view, phase one, where we want to, first of all, really increase automation and integration. Automation is that automation really is that thing that says, hey, let's take the routine things or the simple things and take them out of the analyst's hands and do that more and more and more and more. Integration is where you make sure your tools can talk and work with one another. The more your tools integrate with each other, the better your automation will be, and the better your bang for the buck will get from automation. So you want to start ingesting threat intelligence, and not just threat intel from external sources, but your own threat intel, because you know your environment, you know what's happened before. So feed that information back into your detections and your automation to help make it better. So start your migration, or plan your migration from your on-prem SOC to a cloud-based tools. You're not going to be able to process and store the amount of logs and do the amount of compute on those logs with an on-prem unless you have an unlimited budget. And if you do, call me. I'd love to work for someone like that. You just don't have that money. You're going to have to expand into the cloud. And I understand cloud's not automatically cheaper, but having that flexibility, it is going to improve your ability to store more and compute more. You want to start doing an asset, a data, and an identity inventory management. Know what assets, what physical assets you still have, and start identifying what identities you have out there, both users and entities and services, as well as where your data is, because you need to shift your thinking from protecting devices to protecting data and identity. So phase two, where now we're starting to move into the cloud. So as you do that, start splitting your data out. What's your high value data going that is great for doing security alerts? And what is your other data, not low value, but other data where you're actually working on, you're able to use that and leverage that for machine learning and AI and deep analysis, for large data sets. So start splitting that out. The other data can go into cheaper storage, but your first data is going to in your log analysis. What you're really doing is you're preparing so that someday all of your data is going into the cheap storage and your analytic and your compute is going to be separate. This is where you really can start migrating to SOC-based to cloud-based SOC tools to handle that difference in compute, as well as where you start using your machine learning and AI on that large data set. Start using risk-based analysis or user-based analysis tools. And those tools have come a long way since when they were first introduced 10, 15 years ago. And they're really starting to mature in their ability to bring out anomalies that are valuable, and then that you can actually use to do alerting or at least investigations. Remember, an anomaly is not an alert. They're two different things, but an anomaly can drive the creation thereof. Your security becomes focused on identity and data, and start measuring your progress is what you also want to do. So your final phase, where you want to really end up, is you want to be completely in the cloud. You want to have that log storage separate from your compute and your analytics. Your compute and your analytics are doing all of your alerting, from your atomic alerting. If this happens, make me an alert, because I know this thing is bad. You want to do your machine learning, where it's doing those, hey, this is weird. It is weird enough that it should be investigated. Your AI, whatever that is in 5 years, right? I'm not thinking about AI today. I'm thinking about the advances we're going to make in 5, 10 years, right? That's the kind of AI where, what is it going to be that, and AI that's specifically created for security environments, where it's trained on security environments to say, hey, I'm processing this, and I know that in a security viewpoint, this is suspicious enough that you should do something. UBA and RBA as well. You want to change your structure from tiered to teams, right? You want to have teams where each team has all of the components of your SOC, your analyst, your IR, your threat hunter, your threat intelligence, and they're doing all the monitoring, and then you want to break it down. What this gives you the ability is to have seniors and juniors working together to all build each other up in a team. You get rid of that tier. You also have that, you get rid of that tiered structure, and you have now a growth path. When you bring on the entry-level person, they don't see themselves hitting that tier 1 and being like, now what? I can't go anywhere. I have to go to another company. And so in that, you also are doing teams. You also have created a detection engineering DevOps environment where that's overall everything that's doing that constant building of alerting and tuning and such. You are organizing a team. Partner with an MSSP or MDR to cover gaps where you don't have the ability to do either ticketing or tier 1 or triage or maybe threat intel. So that's not a problem. And you're part of that then is you're doing training from your juniors and up. Initiate AI, as I mentioned before, AI can be absolutely useful to help prompt for options to do things. Hey, I want to go check, whether you're a junior and they're still learning, where you can say, hey, this event happened. Here are 4 or 5 different actions you can take next from here, and that helps them learn, as opposed to maybe a senior uses AI to say, man, I have gone through everything I can think of. Maybe there's another path that I didn't think of. So you're using it for analysis and investigative assistance. So how do you get there? Most important thing on this slide is start with what you have. You don't have to just throw out the baby in the bathwater. To begin this process, start with what you have, figure out how to get better automation and better integration in with what you have. So simplify tools if possible. Do you have a tool that has 4 to 5 do you have tools that overlap in 3 or 4 areas? Maybe you don't need that tool. Maybe you've neglected part of one tool that could get rid of another tool. So simplify, help your analysts out. Develop and hire talent that does cloud, that does programming, does DevOps, has those skills, because those skills are going to be needed. So develop them in-house if which is great. But hire with that thought down the road as well. Begin your zero trust journey. This is coming, and and you understand what zero trust is, but understand how it applies to your environment, not just sort of what someone else did or some vendor is telling you. What does that mean in your environment to constantly authenticate and authorize every transaction that is going on? So in conclusion, no 2 socks will be the same, but all should have the same goals. So there's a lot of stuff in here. Not all of it applies to you. That's fine. I'm not here to, this isn't tailored specifically to a person. It's trying to give you all these thoughts so that you can say, oh, hey, these things really are good for me. And I should probably look at these other things to see other items and other tasks, right? To see if it applies. So you want to implement and continue automation efforts. At a slow, steady pace, right? This isn't like do all the automation now. That's like 1 a week or 1 a month. Whatever it is, it's continually improving and implementing. Consume tailored threat intel that applies to you or your vertical or your horizontal, whatever your environment is. Shift your operations to the cloud. Start protecting identity and data instead of devices. Start really developing a capability and an understanding and use cases for ML and AI down the road, right? It may not be today. Maybe AI doesn't have the ability to do what you want it to do. That's fine. It's probably coming in 3 to 5 to 10 years. Think about that. Plan for detection engineering and use short and long-term planning to pursue zero trust and resilience. And with that, that is my baby steps to a next gen SOC. And here's my contact information in the slides. There are some references, including a white paper that I wrote a couple years ago on this. So
nice, very good. No, thank you for that. I agree. SOC, we see this a lot where security operations centers just haven't evolved much past here's a playbook, go forward. So I think you're absolutely right that we need to evolve there. Now, we've got about 4 minutes until our next speaker, and I want to give them a chance to, get set up and whatnot. So there were a few questions. I'm going to say them aloud so you know that we've received them. But then if you could go into Discord so for those who have additional questions, go into our Discord, discord.gg/Antisyphon, and look for August 2023 Summit Track 2. And Craig, will you be able to go over there and answer a few questions?
I believe so. I brought up the Discord, and let's see.
What's your Discord ID? I'll just ping you.
That is a good question. What is my Discord? It should be Reswob 10, I believe. What is?
Okay, you're gonna have to spell that one for me, or
RESWOB. It's right there on my Twitter account.
Oh, it's right on the screen. Huh, don't mind me. I am smart. Let's take a look here.
Oh no, it's Reswob. Sorry. Oh no, it is Reswob 10.
Oh, Reswob. Oh, I typed it wrong. Look at me. I am all over this.
Reswob is my last name backwards, so if that's.
Oh yes, there we go. Now there we go. That should get you a notification, get you over there on that channel.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
Perfect.
All right. Jump
so
in.
Yeah, we did get a couple questions. So maybe you can just jump in right from go. An anonymous attendee said, I had Sophos XDR solution in place, but haven't started setting queries yet. Any advice on where to start? And then Taylor Schmidt also asked, how do you recommend filtering out the quote noise in most threat intel? So we won't answer that here, but if you can join folks over in Discord and answer those questions, that would be super duper wonderful. So Craig, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing what you've put together over so many years and what you're helping people do to evolve what they do in their SOC. So thanks for your time. Thanks for coming out.
No worries. Thank you. Appreciate you guys having me.
All right. While we get set up for the next speaker, just a reminder, like I said, we are over in Discord today. We're in the Antisyphon Discord. Go over to discord.gg/Antisyphon. And if you're already in there, jump into the August 2023 Summit and we're in August 2023 Summit Track 2. That's where we're going to be chatting, taking comments, slinging memes. No blues will be played to my knowledge, unless someone breaks out like a saxophone or some sort of organ or something like that. I don't know. I'm not your mom. Coming up next here, also, if you are here and you are looking for Jonathan Rogers, who's been talking about who's been stealing cookies from the cookie jar, well, you're in the wrong place. You need to go over to track 1. So grab your link to track 1 and head on over there if that's who you're looking for. But if you are looking for Jenna Lawrence, which I think you probably should be, we're going to talk about, and I love your title, by the way, documentation, the first line of defense. One of my first, I have to tell this story real quick. One of my first interactions with John Strand, owner of Black Hills Information Security, is I'd written an article for Tripwire. And it was on Black Hat. And the title of it was The Hottest Technology You Didn't See on the Black Hat Floor. And it was documentation. Nobody talks about the value of documentation. And that got me invited into Enterprise Security Weekly to come and talk about it. So I love, Jenna, that you're talking about this. So why don't you come off and mute for us? Let's just make sure we can hear you and all that.
Thank you. I love documentation. So
yeah, great. So I'm looking forward to hearing this. Let me do just a quick introduction for you, and then we'll hand it over to you here at the noon hour. Again, if you're looking for Jonathan Rogers and who's been stealing cookies, you're on the wrong track. Head over to the other one, but you should stay here because this is going to be a good talk. So Jenna Lawrence is a security engineer at L2 Cyber Solutions. Most of her day-to-day work is consulting on government contracts with a focus on maintaining documentation and GRC-related items. I'm glad you're doing it because I do not envy the amount of boxes that need to be checked for government roles. So previously, she was a security engineer working in in-house SOC and was a point of escalation for security response, graduating in 2022 with a bachelor's in cybersecurity from Metropolitan State University of Denver. We have lots of friends in Denver. CJ is out of Denver. So during your time in school, you were an intern for pen testing companies. You currently hold a CompTIA Sec Plus and a CYSA Plus certification. And I like this one too. You are the president for the Women in Cybersecurity LGBTQ plus Pride affiliate. That's awesome. Can you tell me a little bit about what you do there real quick?
yeah, we have people all over in the Women in Cybersecurity organization all come together in a Discord, and we do virtual events and meetups, mostly virtual because everyone's all over. But once a year when we have the Women in Cybersecurity conference, we all get together and we like to call ourselves the party affiliate because we go to some of the gay bars around the local area.
Nice. So no, that's awesome. It's always great to have organizations, especially go out to conferences and say, hey, we know each other online. Let's get together. And you're here, we're here. Let's go check out some of the local scenery, bars and restaurants and entertainment. So I think that's enough for me, though. I think we're ready to hear about the first line of defense. So Jenna, whenever you're ready, you can take it away. But for everyone else, we're going to go off. And if you have any questions, put them in that Discord channel or in the Q&A here. And if we have time at the end, we'll answer it. And then can you stick around a little bit in Discord in case we run up on time? Wonderful.
Yes.
Jenna. Now I will truly stop talking. Take it away.
Awesome. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Jenna Lawrence, and today I will be talking about everyone's favorite topic in the tech field, documentation. Before we get started, I will share a little bit about myself and my background up until today. Like I said, and Ian, who introduced me, my name is Jenna Lawrence, and I'm based in Denver, Colorado. I have been working in cybersecurity since 2019, and I graduated with a BS in cybersecurity from Metropolitan State University of Denver. My previous job was a security operations center, and I was an escalation point for incident response, but now I am with L2 Cyber Solutions as a security engineer and consultant for government contract, where I mostly take care of GRC documentation activities. I also am part of Women in Cybersecurity organization, and I'm currently serving as the president. We have over 100 members in our Discord server, and we plan the virtual meetups and events like I mentioned earlier. So if you want to check it out, I definitely encourage you to. Everyone is welcome, and it's always free. In my free time, I like to play video games. I do craft fairs for hand embroidery, sewing, and sometimes other crafts. And I also recently got a couple of pet rats pictured here that I love to play with them and take care of them. They're actually really smart. Today, my talk will go over what documentation is, my experiences with documentation and all the problems that came along with it, why documentation is needed, how to write documentation with an adaptable checklist to you, how to maintain documentation, then we'll end with a few minutes for Q&A. Now, I'm sure we all have experience with documentation in some form or fashion, whether you've used it to train when you first start a new job, used it to find answers, or if you've even tried to write it to describe a process while staring at a blank template, thinking to yourself, wow, I really, really hate this. But what actually is documentation? The official definition I could find online is everything related to the protection of an organization's information and property. But to me, it's so much more than that, and it's also not a lot of things. Documentation is not going to be sticky notes or emails or Slack messages you send to your coworkers. It's also not in hard to find places, and it's definitely not a one and done thing. You can't write something in 2005 and never touch it again. Just think about how many people and technologies have changed in your organization since then. Now, documentation is things like playbooks, network maps, and system information. It can be reports like penetration test reports, vulnerability scan results, and incident reports. And most importantly, documentation is always stored somewhere that those who need it can access it. If it's not easily accessible, it will not be helpful. At my previous company, I took over most of the day-to-day work of the documentation for the team. Now, I know a lot of you will call me crazy for this, but it's something I am truly passionate about. And in a bit, I'm going to talk about how bad of an idea it is for one person to take on all the documentation like this. But for now, I'll tell you the story of how our SOC worked. When I started at this company, it was my first real security job out of college. I started working overnight, mainly dealing with tickets in the SOC. And when I started, what I didn't have was a good library of updated documentation. I definitely had plenty of documentation to go through, and much of it was more than a few years old without updates. When I would browse through it and talk to other coworkers, many of them didn't even know it still existed, or they would tell me the process had changed since then. That was frustrating. How was I supposed to learn the ins and outs of the tickets if the processes I was reading about weren't even right anymore? I had to learn from coworkers, explaining how things were done today. That impacts both of us. They had to take the time to explain it to me. I had to understand, take notes, ask clarifying questions repeatedly, annoying them. Now, I know there's a learning curve when you're starting a new job. I'm not complaining about the fact I had to be trained, but I think many of the training sessions I had with coworkers could have been minimized if the documentation was kept up with when I started. There would be more documentation for me to go through. I could have been caught up to speed much quicker. After a while working the overnight shift, I finally transitioned to day shift. Around the same time, a few people were leaving the company. They were previously tasked with starting and maintaining a documentation system, mostly in the form of policies, how to use things, and playbooks for working tickets. This was a big task, and it started slowly after I started working at the company. So it wasn't helpful for my training, like I said, but I showed interest in helping develop the documentation previously. And now that everybody had left, I was the one taking over the massive project to continue updating, maintaining, and writing it. I didn't even really know what that entailed, but I did my best with it. And along the way, I came up with a few ideas on how to make it better before I moved on to a new organization. For a while, I kept with the old system, We had used Word document templates to consolidate all the documentation. They were organized into folders on the shared network drive, and there was no good guide on writing the documentation. All I had to reference were old documents that were already written, some of them multiple years old. There were quite a few problems with this system. For one, and arguably the biggest issue, it wasn't searchable. There was no place I could go to type in a keyword to pull up all the documents about that keyword. Instead, I had to sort through the documents based on the title alone, and that took so much time to get things done. Another thing that was very frustrating is that it took a long time to pull up documents. After working like this for a while, it would get annoying when I had to open many Word documents just to find the one I was looking for. These two aspects combined would be super frustrating, not just for me, but for coworkers as well. I even asked some of my other coworkers what their biggest issues were with the current system. Many of them said one of these two things. They also continued to say they wished they could edit it or add a comment on it, but they still wanted to see the version history so it can be reverted later. None of them wanted to edit the Word document and accidentally mess it up somewhere along the way. Very intimidating to try to edit a Word document. And another piece of feedback I got was that people wanted it to be easily hyperlinked between different pieces of documentation, as well as different tools and technologies that were in use. To help with this issue, and with the support of my management, I wanted to come up with a better system. I wanted the documentation to be searchable. I wanted it to be quick. I wanted it to only be accessible to those who need it. I wanted it to be able to hyperlink to other resources and related documentation. And I wanted it to allow for edits and comments with access to version history. Well, the company already had something that basically checked all these boxes in the form of like a web-based corporate wiki, think something like Confluence. And we weren't already using it for documentation on my team at this point. So I pushed for all the documentation to be moved there because that's the first step. It took about a month and I uploaded most of it myself, hoping that this would be more helpful for everyone. But my boss still wanted to follow our loose Operations 101 templates, where each document would fall into one of the following categories: policy, procedure, and work instructions. I thought it would be a good idea to have specific titles of the tickets and security detections linked in the documentation too. So I added the category detections. Therefore, we came up with 4 categories for documentation templates. For our team, policies were things like the on-call policy, the forensic initiation policy, and basic shift expectations. Procedures were mostly written to explain how to use different security tools and general overviews on how to work most types of tickets, but we didn't go very in depth with that. And work instructions, the most granular, explained how to work specific tickets or use tools to work specific tickets, and step-by-step instructions on how to do specific processes like sending out a shift report. Finally, the detections category would give an overview on specific security detections in our SIEM or cloud environment and even EDR, and what a specific ticket could be referring to. I would link these with the relevant procedures and work instructions to allow someone to see the documentation of everything related to these detections. This helped me categorize all of our documentation. I used these categories on the documentation landing page, which served as a central hub to find all of the documentation we developed. For example, I've made a similar looking documentation page here that I did for the SOC for the purpose of this presentation. This landing page would show up on the corporate-based wiki, like I mentioned earlier. This one has all the documentation listed, and they're easily linked to be able to find them. And I will note that this landing page was only accessible to those people on our team, so nobody else in the company could see this except for page admins. The policies are the standards, and they won't contain much how-to. They mostly focus on what the company policy is. The procedures are linked next. such as a general overview on approaching tickets with external authentication errors, and another procedure on a general overview to use the Splunk environment. The work instructions list the in-depth how-tos, such as how to create and send a shift report, and a specific ticket with the title Suspicious Command Issued on Cisco Device from External Source. As you can see, that title is also the title for the detection. The idea is that these two pieces would be linked. The detection piece would be the raw Splunk query, and the work instructions would tell someone how to work that ticket when it came up. Now, I know these categories and this example are very specific to the SOC that I worked in, but the idea of developing categories like this in general might be able to help you in your role when you go back and review the documentation at your organization. I had this plan set up before I left the company, so I'm not sure if it's still in use today, but I feel I left everything off at the very best spot I could so that it allowed for collaboration, accessibility, easy to find and search, and easy maintenance. So why the need for updating the documentation at any level? Good documentation can be used as a guidebook for all new hires. It accelerates training. It'll get people up to speed faster than traditional training methods. Even if people aren't even training anymore, they still may need to use documentation as an on-the-job reference if they come across something that they don't work with every day. Especially when in a SOC with hundreds of detections, I never memorized every single ticket name, and documentation was especially helpful for working these types of tickets that I rarely came across. Documentation can also determine any gaps within the team or company. It really helps outlining your assets, and from there you can see if anything is missing. Creating and maintaining documentation is a delicate balance. We don't want too little documentation to not be able to thoroughly explain the tasks that need to get done or the important policies, but too much documentation is going to overwhelm people. And let's be honest, not everyone wants to sit and read through hours and hours of documents every day. So we have to figure out how to write good documentation based on these ideas, but not overdo it. These questions will start to help you develop a good system that'll work for your company. And then in a bit, we'll go over a checklist on writing specific documentation itself. First, you want to define your needs or expectations for your company or your team's documentation plan. What generally needs to be documented? Is there anything required for you to document? Next, you'll want to outline specific assets to cover to fit these needs that were defined. Do you need to define all tickets in your SOC and have a document for each one? If so, list out what each ticket is. Do you need to develop documentation for every penetration test you've completed, or do you need to have a document for every incident worked? This is the spot that you list these things out. This is not going to be exhaustive, but it can give you a really good idea on how big of a task this might be. Next, you'll want to think about the day-to-day job for every role that would benefit from this documentation. How will people use this for their specific position? Does it apply to everyone, or is it just the one specific role? And finally, you need to find people to help develop it. Those who work with the asset directly are the best resource to explain it thoroughly, and it's a good idea to develop some sort of template as well. This will help standardize every document and help people working through it to complete it faster. Part of the checklist I'll go over in a bit helps with this template as well. And this should not just be one or two people taking on all of the documentation for their role. It should be as much of a team effort as possible, divided equally. Now, there may be some strong writers on your team, and those that like to write could volunteer to take on more work. That's great in an ideal setting, and that's much how I liked to work in my previous roles. But I know as tech people, there's not always someone on your team who wants to spend their 40 hours a week writing documentation for the next couple of months. Now, this is also not to say a technical writer isn't a good asset, but not all the teams have resources to devote one role specifically to documentation or technical writing. But if there is truly a role on your team for technical writer or a documentation expert, I still encourage them to collaborate with the members of the team who actually work with the content of the documentation. Because of my experience in the SOC, I ensured there was a checklist when developing new documentation and editing old documentation up to standard. I helped come up with some of these items to ensure I wasn't making redundant documentation and to make sure everything was covered that needed to be. This will vary slightly depending on what your team needs, but ultimately ask yourself some of these questions when reviewing your team or company's documentation. When I helped develop these, I used them on every template as a built-in for every documentation piece that was developed. The first thing to outline is who the audience is for the document. You'll want to keep the audience in mind so it can be written for the appropriate crowd. The next thing is the purpose of the document. Each document should have a purpose. For example, the purpose of this document is to teach people how to work this specific ticket with that specific tool. The next thing is the category the documentation falls into based on the 4 ones I mentioned earlier, but your organization may just have a different set of categories. Just do what works best for your team. The next one asks about related documentation that's already created that can tie into this piece. Under that, I've also put another question asking if the content of this document is already covered by the related documentation. If most of it or all of it is already covered, or there's a lot of overlap, there may not need to be a second one created, especially if the information can be compiled into one document. But use your best judgment for this. One example I have is when I was developing documentation for an EDR tool we used, I had a procedure that gave a general overview on navigating the EDR, and then another work instruction for using the specific search functionality within the EDR because it had its own specific syntax and caveats that I wanted to make sure to go in depth with for the team. I didn't want them to use the tools documentation as often. I really just did commonly used things for our environment itself. The next question is how this document is going to benefit the audience. If it's not going to benefit the audience, that might be something to get a second opinion on. And finally, the last question asks who is responsible for updating and maintaining this document. It could be something as simple as the SOC or listing out a few specific positions. It should be included though, because if no one is outlined as responsible, it might go a few years without actually being updated. I did develop a little example of the checklist answers. Again, this is very helpful to include on each piece of documentation for the start of the template. I wanted to run through it with the title of the ticket we saw earlier, entitled Suspicious Command Issued on Cisco Device from External Source. The audience for this one is Tier 1 security engineers in the SOC. The purpose of this document is to teach engineers how to work a ticket with the title of the document. This document falls into the work instruction category. The related documentation to this one is the detection with the same title that shows the raw Splunk query. The documentation benefits the audience by teaching them how to work this specific ticket if it comes up in their ticket queue. And finally, the SOC is responsible for maintaining the documentation. It's really as simple as that. After you have done this, you can start writing the bulk of the content for this document. I have a few tips for the content itself, but most of the writing part relies on your specific team. When you're developing the documentation, always keep the audience in mind. You just want to make sure you're writing it geared towards them. Make sure the first mention of any abbreviations or acronyms are explained, even if it seems like common knowledge. Spelling it out literally will help others not be confused, especially because in this field, we all really love reusing acronyms for multiple things. When writing the documentation itself, use bullet points or short paragraphs, or even steps that are numbered. Don't present your reader with a wall of text. Nobody wants to read that. Our brains tend to skip around and skim things anyway. Shorter, concise language and spacing will make it really easy to ingest a lot of information just from a psychology perspective. And finally, have someone review it when you're done. Have them try to recreate the process, make sure they understand the how-to, Make sure grammar and spelling seems mostly accurate. It helps to have someone there to review things, especially if it's one person who is working on it, because when we're working on something for a long time, we tend to miss it. Once everything is said and done, the next step is to maintain all that wonderful documentation you just created. Maintaining documentation should be easier than developing it if you keep up with it. You should definitely update it as you go. If something changes in as little as a week after you write a certain document, don't be afraid to edit the document to be updated. Review the documentation at least once a year, if not more than that. This means all the documentation, make sure processes haven't changed, make any updates while going through it. This ties into the first point, because if you continuously update the documentation throughout the year, you'll definitely have less to worry about at the end of it. And don't be afraid to clean up documents as well. If a tool is no longer in use at your company, don't keep that documentation around that says how to use it. You might need to retain it for company policy, but simply write somewhere in the beginning that this document is no longer in use so people don't waste their time. Documentation is more than just an afterthought. It's more than just something you scramble together for compliance purposes. If it's written right, documentation can be the first line of defense for your company, so you and your coworkers are prepared when something inevitably goes wrong and you have something to reference on the fly. It can be a great team effort to really make sure everyone on your team can at least describe the day-to-day processes they do. And finally, documentation is not going away no matter how much you hate it, so embrace it, embrace the process, and I hope that something I said here resonated with you today. Here are the references I used to help me with today's presentation. And with that, thank you. And I'd like to open it up for any questions.
Okay, so first, that was awesome. And I want to say why. Because if those of you listening, there was so much there that if you listen to like, yeah, of course, go through and make sure your documents are organized, make sure they're searchable, make sure that these things are there. I literally spent years in large corporations. The fact that you go through and say, you're essentially talking about creating a taxonomy, like how do we put these documents in? How do we make them living documents that can be updated? I cannot overstate how important that is. And once we've got this talk up and recorded, I am literally going to be linking people to it to say, watch this. If you're not starting here, you're just setting yourself up for a world of pain. And you're going to go, why isn't any of this written down? Because you need someone, and this term sounds a little off, but what you're talking about is a data custodian. Somebody who goes through and says, this document is irrelevant, this one is relevant, this one's deprecated, and can do that. And people who have used a really good knowledge base might not know that that's happened, but can feel it. So, I mean, just excellent. You did have a couple questions. So you covered a lot. So Anonymous here, I would love any tips on how you organize your operations documents, metadata tagging suggestions. Now, I know you covered some of that, but I might have missed. Did you cover anything about metadata? And do you have anything else you want to add?
I didn't. And when I was doing this for this talk, it was very hard for me as a single person to develop all of it. So I don't think we did anything with metadata. We basically had our tickets, like I explained, our tools, our policies, and our detections. And that was kind of where I left it off. But I don't think on the corporate wiki we had tagging, but we might have. I just might have missed it. But that would be a good idea if there was some sort of tagging that could easily just auto tie things in together.
Nice. A couple people kind of asked a similar question. So for sake of time, I'm going to compress it. They were all around like, what's your favorite tool, essentially? Whether it be creating playbooks or whether it be just organizing the documentation into something. What would you suggest people use based on your preferences?
Well, so I really only have experience with the one. It was Confluence, which we used. Okay. So I just kind of went through and created pages and sub pages from that. Mm-hmm. But I would love to look into more tools and see comparable things to that. But right now, trying to get my government clearance and doing all that, I don't even know what some of the stuff they use is for that is.
Yeah, and it might be even internal, been
Mhm.
around since George Washington did the first post in the knowledge base. So we talked about tagging, we talked about that. Does your company, or have you worked with a technical writer before? And do you think, this is Muhammad asking this question, do you think that's valuable? Do you think you need a technical writer to do some of these?
I think a technical writer is a great asset if you can get one. I know a lot of teams probably cannot get one. I have never worked with one before. I know I've wanted to be one in the past, but I know that could be a great person to bounce ideas off of. When I was kind of acting as a technical writer role in my SOC, I would definitely go talk to the people on my team who had the most knowledge of the tool, get all the notes from them. And then as I'm developing the documentation, I would try to talk to them about it. So if you do have a technical writer role, make sure you're talking to the people who actually use the stuff.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The technical writer can only sharpen it. They can't explain it necessarily. They can just ask the right questions. All right, so we are about a minute away from our next speaker. Jenna, thank you so much for this. I mean this. This isn't just patter. This was fantastic, and I think a well overlooked topic that punches way above its weight when you do it right. For some of you who had some questions in here that were anonymous that said, any tips on organizing giant libraries of old documentation? Well, I think you kind of talked about that, but Jenna, you said you're going to hang out in the Discord for a little bit if folks have additional questions, right?
Yes, I can do that.
Excellent. So join Jenna over in Summit Track 2 in our Discord, discord.gg/Antisyphon, and we're under August 2023 Summit. Jenna, again, thank you so much for sharing and coming and hanging out. Very good. So we'll have you drop off. And next up, we have Anton. And I see Anton in the waiting room. Anton, you there?
I am, yes. Hello.
There they are. Oh, you sound great. I'm jealous of the Shure microphone.
Oh, awesome.
Excellent. So you're our next speaker here. Just a couple quick house notes. Again, the way we've been doing things is these are short talks, so sometimes we don't always have time for questions. We'll try and answer as many as we can. But Anton, after you're done with your talk, will you have some time that you can go over into the Discord and answer any additional questions?
Yeah, of course. Love interaction and answering questions for sure.
Fantastic. Okay, so coming up here, we've got Anton here. They're going to talk about cloud security, why the endpoint still matters. So just a quick introduction for them. Anton is beyond his security research work with Sumo Logic, Threat Labs. Anton is a speaker, volunteer, and holds multiple security certifications, including an OSCE, very jealous of that, OSCP, CISSP, CSSP, and KCNA. KCNA is escaping. What is a KCNA?
It's the Cloud Native Associate. The name actually is
Cloud. Yes, the Cloud Native with the huge, all the things connected. And
yeah, I gotta have
if
that.
You can translate that
these days. Yeah.
Holy Toledo! Yeah. All right. So enjoys defensive aspects of cybersecurity. Loves diving headfirst into logs and queries to discover new insights. Oh, and enjoys cycling and drum and bass music.
Yep.
Drum and bass. Who's your favorite drum and bass?
Pretty much London Electricity, I think, would be my favorite drum and bass artist. Okay. If you haven't checked them out, give them a Google.
I will do that.
Really uplifting.
That's precisely why I was asking.
Awesome, yeah.
A friend and old coworker who he would listen in his headphones to a lot of drum and bass, and all we could hear was the
yeah.
And we would say, oh, Mike's listening to his best of steam locomotives.
That's
but it was
awesome.
always good once you could hear everything. So
right.
Excellent. So you're going to hang out a little bit. Do we have your slides already? Are those already up in
They should be, yeah.
Wonderful.
I'll share my screen as well.
Excellent. Yeah, go ahead and get that up, and then we'll hand off to you. So again, if you're not over in the Discord, get over there, discord.gg/Antisyphon, and join us in the August 2023 Summit Track 2. Also, if you are looking for, and you're like, well, wait a minute, I was looking for Sean Goodwin talking about 7 ways to frustrate attackers, you need to be over in Track 1. But you don't want to do that. You're probably here for Anton. So Anton, thank you so much for speaking, and whenever you're ready, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much for the introduction, and thanks so much for attending. I know everyone's time is extremely valuable, so listening to myself talk, it's a big honor for me, so thank you very much. So yeah, just to set the stage, this talk will be about cloud security and why the endpoint still matters in cloud security. And as previously mentioned, my name is Anton Rutsky. I'm a senior threat research engineer at Sumo Logic. And you can find me on Twitter using, or X, Anton Loves D&B is my handle. Love to talk shop, so just hit me up if you have any questions or anything about this talk or anything in general. Happy to chat with you. So just diving into the actual presentation here, and to kind of set the stage, I thought it would be kind of a fun exercise to look at a Google Trends search and look at cloud computing and ransomware, with the blue line being cloud computing and the red line being ransomware, and with how kind of like disruptive and in the news ransomware has been. I kind of thought that the trend would be kind of similar, right? That the lines would kind of match and would be on the same level. But I was pretty surprised to discover that ransomware still kind of pales in comparison to the general popularity and focus on cloud computing. And we could look at a ton of other data sources as well. And all of these data sources would kind of point us in the same direction, that cloud computing is kind of top of mind for various enterprises, businesses, IT leaders, and things like that. And there's a whole bunch of lenses that we could look at cloud computing through. But in this presentation, we're going to focus on the defensive aspects of cloud computing, including how we as, information security professionals who are on the defensive end of the InfoSec spectrum think about, or at least kind of should be directionally be thinking about threats to cloud environments. So turning back to the question at the start of this presentation, does the endpoint still matter in a cloud security world? And if it does, where does it fit in with our threat models, queries, detection strategies, et cetera? And I'm sure everyone is kind of waiting on bated breath for the answer, but we could go ahead and save you a lot of time and answer this hypothetical question with a very emphatic yes. The endpoint obviously still does matter in the cloud security world and in the cloud security paradigm. And as I'll hopefully demonstrate in this presentation, the endpoint can often act as a gateway or entryway into a cloud environment. So having said that, let's do a quick association test altogether. And this is especially relevant for folks who kind of live and breathe MITRE ATT&CK. If I went ahead and mentioned the tactic of credential access, normally the technique that comes to mind is OS credential dumping. And obviously the tool that's associated with this is, of course, everyone's favorite Kiwi, Mimikatz. So let's dive a bit deeper into this kind of dynamic and compare two credential access techniques. The first one being OS credential dumping from LSAS memory, and the second being steal web session cookie. So for the LSAS memory dumping technique, we could see about 55 procedural examples in attack, followed by 4 detections and about 7 mitigations. And at least this was the case when I made these slides a couple weeks ago. And if you're a fan of Sigma, there's about 78 rules that cover this particular technique. So quite a bit of Sigma rules that cover LSAS memory credential dumping theft. And it kind of makes sense that this particular technique has a lot of attention given to it, as most EDR tools are all over this type of technique. And it's been known for many years. Obviously, everyone knows what Mimikatz is and everything like that. So let's take a look at our second technique using the same kind of methodology here. So looking at the steal web session cookie technique through that same lens of, the MITRE analysis, we can already see a pretty stark difference. And we only see 10 procedural examples this time, 3 mitigations and 2 detections, with only 1 Sigma rule being available. So does this mean that this particular technique, stealing a web session cookie, is any less risky than OS credential dumping? And as we'll see in an upcoming demo, a stolen cookie from a web browser could provide a threat actor with a pathway to a cloud environment. And in many cases, the cookie can be stolen from a user who does not have privileged rights on their endpoint, but do have these rights to a cloud environment. And this dynamic is what OWASP calls a trust boundary. And the technique of stealing a web session cookie can potentially aid threat actors in crossing such a trust boundary. So in other words, this is a significantly risky technique that is worth our attention. So let's dig a little bit deeper into the attack data and take a look at the data source component. And this is kind of one of my favorite things to do with the MITRE ATT&CK dataset, is to analyze the data source component of it. And if we go ahead and query the MITRE ATT&CK enterprise JSON file and look at how many data sources are tied to steal web session cookie versus dumping LSAS memory, we can see a huge and stark difference where the cookie technique only has 2 data source components, whereas the LSAS memory dumping technique has about double that amount. And this is an interesting dynamic, and I would argue that in the world of cloud, a stolen cookie is equally, if not more risky than a stolen LSAS memory dump. But let's not take my word for it. Let's challenge that assumption a little bit and look at these 2 techniques from a threat actor point of view. So when we go ahead and do that, when we look at these 2 techniques from a threat actor point of view, who has a choice of performing one or the other of these techniques, and we look at the first row there being EDR, meaning endpoint detection and response products, these controls and products have over the years actually become very good at detecting in-memory credential theft of LSAS. In addition to that, these days there's a whole bunch of hardening options available on Windows operating systems for hardening your LSAS process. And obviously I know there's bypasses for all that kind of stuff, but overall, this is generally a category that EDR products are actually pretty good at. If we go ahead and look at the 2 techniques from a logging standpoint, so in other words, what telemetry is generated by the system when either of these techniques is performed, we noted earlier that there's many Sigma rules available for LSAS memory dumping, but a lot fewer for cookie theft. And this is not Sigma's fault at all. This is not the fault of the contributors to Sigma who volunteer their time and everything, as even when we looked at the MITRE data sources, we noted that there was just fewer detection opportunities for something like cookie theft. In terms of reward, and this is reward kind of to the threat actor, a stolen browser cookie typically provides authenticated browser sessions to the threat actor. And these days in 2023, an LSAS memory dump may or may not contain clear text credentials or other credential materials such as keys or Kerberos tickets or whatever. And in networks that are appropriately hardened against lateral movement techniques, these credentials can be of little use to the threat actor, or at least, that's what we all hope. That's the best case scenario that we're all kind of striving towards. Looking at the final category there, exfiltration options, a lot of EDR products will flag when an LSAS memory dump file is detected on disk. And I know there's other options available to exfiltrate that kind of thing, but browser cookies are just a flat JSON file typically when they're stolen from a web browser. And this often doesn't trigger the same type of EDR or even DLP rules as an LSAS dump would. So from a threat actor perspective, if we look at these 2 techniques from their point of view, in many cases, cookie theft may present a more attractive and less restrictive pathway for threat actors to go ahead and achieve their evil goals. And to kind of go ahead and bring this dynamic back to our cloud theme, just go ahead and think about how users in your organization access the cloud. They do so via a browser of some kind or a terminal. So now that I have hopefully convinced all of you that browser cookie theft and other types of non-LSAS credential dumping techniques present an attractive pathway for a threat actor, and not only that, they may present a more fruitful access for them as well with less monitoring in place. So given all these dynamics that we talked about, what are some other, weak spots or soft spots that exist on endpoints where credentials like to hang out? And this is obviously not an exhaustive list, but some areas that I've come across and have seen that contain very critical credentials are file shares. Networks are typically filled with a lot of file shares, and this is an area where tech debt shines pretty brightly, where systems get upgraded, credentials get left behind on file shares. This kind of thing happens all the time. On files on endpoints is another area. This is your keys, tokens, or even plain text credentials like to hang out in files called, keys.txt or password.txt. And these files typically have pretty limited monitoring around them and a limited amount of governance wrapped around them. Even though administrative controls exist, telling users, hey, don't store your password in a file called password.txt on your desktop, we all know that this kind of thing still happens. The other area that I covered pretty heavily so far is browser cookies. And as I mentioned, these are a very attractive target for threat actors. And the final area here is cloud tokens. And these are things like your AWS or Azure CLI credentials. And we'll see in some upcoming demos and screenshots that I have that these credentials usually hang out on endpoints for users who access or administer cloud resources, and they're stored in either plain text or are encrypted with DPAPI. However, with DPAPI, you can go ahead and reverse that encryption, which I'll show you in a second. So let's go on a little journey all together and cover some alerting, detection, and hunting strategies for each one of these weak spots. So we'll start with file shares, and the event IDs that you'll need here are your 5145 and 5140s. These will provide you with visibility into what share was accessed and which file was accessed within that file share. In terms of detection strategies, we can go ahead and start with a relatively simple alert, just looking at a high number of failed or successful access events to file shares. In typical Windows networks, you might find that service accounts exhibit this kind of behavior. So my advice here is to start with a pretty broad query and then go ahead and just whittle that down and exclude or put your service accounts maybe into a different alerting structure or something like that. You can also combine these access events with a type of honeypot file or a honeypot file share and raise or lower an alerting severity score if this file or file share is actually accessed when you know that it shouldn't be. And of course, this is a step that a lot of blue teamers miss sometimes, is the validation piece. You always want to validate your alerting assumptions and make sure that they actually work the way that you expect them to. So for file shares specifically, we could use tools such as Snaffler or SharpShares. And one thing to keep in mind here is that you probably want to run these tools from user accounts who have different levels of access to your file shares, because you want to test for not only what file shares you can access, but what kinds of files are actually hanging out within those file shares as well. So in the screenshot above, we can kind of see what a Snaffler execution looks like. And below that, we have a sumo logic query that looks for a high share count coming from a username or IP address. And in the query, we're setting a little flag when the high failure count threshold is reached. In this case, it's over 30 file shares. And of course, this query logic can be translated into other SIM formats, your Sentinels, your Splunk, or what have you. And the parameters can be tweaked to match your particular environment. So in some environments, 30 file shares may not be a lot. In others, it may be a ton. So this kind of thing is highly dependent on your particular environment, how many shares you have, how your service accounts behave, and things like that. So turning our attention to files on endpoints, the data that's required here is Windows object auditing. And this needs to be turned on via group policy as well as per the file that you want to audit. And we'll be diving a bit into these events a little bit later. However, for Linux operating systems, you want to monitor the OpenNat syscall via audit D, or even better, something like Laurel, which helps streamline and stitch together audit D logs. If you haven't taken a look at Laurel and you are into Linux threat hunting and things like that, I highly recommend that you take a look at it. In terms of detection strategies, we can again look at file access of a honeypot file, access of known sensitive files by unknown processes, or generally rare access of files. And for validation, this will kind of depend pretty heavily on what kind of files you're monitoring, what kind of keys and tokens, et cetera, you're monitoring. However, one recommendation I have here is to try to access the file not normally through, Explorer or Bash or anything like that, but try to access it through a C2 framework of some kind so that the process flow that is generated looks a little bit different. And if you don't want to mess with setting up C2 frameworks, and nobody does, check out the Sans C2 edition matrix, C2 matrix edition VM. I always get that name confused. It comes with a whole bunch of C2 frameworks pre-installed and ready to go for you. So building off the alerting and detection strategies discussed when looking at suspicious or malicious sensitive file access on an endpoint, let's look at cloud tokens specifically. And this screenshot shows you an example of an Azure token that is found on a workstation for a user or developer or administrator of whoever utilizes the Azure CLI. And the token is encrypted with DPAPI. However, a user has the rights necessary to actually decrypt this file. And in our example, we're using Mimikatz to perform this operation, but there's other tools that can do this kind of thing. And this kind of begs the question, once you kind of see this kind of thing, is how do we know where this file even is on a user's file system? And once we know where it is, how can we set the relevant SACL auditing on the file so that we can get an alert or at least get some telemetry generated when this file is accessed, when mimikatz.exe accesses your Azure token? How do you know when that happens? So we've spent some time discussing the event IDs necessary to alert on file access. However, in order to find the relevant keys and tokens that store cloud credentials on an endpoint, we, the Sumo Threat Research team, has released a couple helper scripts to help you in this and to help you automate this process. The first script is called Set SACL, which runs on Windows. And this script builds pretty heavily off of Roberto Rodriguez's work and his script called Set Audit Rule. And Roberto's script provides the functionality to set SACL auditing via PowerShell. And our script uses that to actually crawl the file system, find AWS, Azure, GCP, and kubeconfig files. And if they're found, and if they don't already have a SACL on them, the script will go ahead and set a SACL on it so that you get some telemetry generated when processes actually go ahead and touch these files. On the Linux side, we released a pretty simple bash script called trufflehog to audit D. And this script takes trufflehog output. And if you haven't heard of trufflehog, it's very good at finding keys, tokens, and things like that, both on file systems and in CI/CD pipelines as well. So the helper script here takes the output that trufflehog gives you, and it parses it, and then it adds those entries into audit D. So again, you get some telemetry generated when a threat actor tries to exfiltrate your cloud credentials. And both these scripts and the relevant write-ups can be found on our Sumo Threat Research blog. I don't have the links in the slides, but if you just Google Sumo Cloud Credentials, the blogs will come up and the links for the scripts will be in there. So once you have the data collected, you've run these awesome scripts, you're messing around with SACLs, you got the open syscalls going to your SIM, you're rocking and rolling. Once you have that data collected, you can actually go ahead and baseline the events using various factors, such as which users are accessing particular files, what processes are accessing these files, which IP addresses, what time of day. All these factors can be utilized on their own or in tandem with other events in order to kind of bubble up malicious activity. So once we have our baselines established, we're in a much better position to go ahead and actually craft alerts. And here's what one looks like in our CloudSIM platform. We can see the cloud credential file that was accessed, what process accessed the cloud credential file, what user performed the operation, as well as the relevant MITRE tags and all that. So at this point, we spent some time looking at the shadowy and perhaps lesser logged areas of networks, specifically around file share access and looking at cloud credential access and things like that. And at this point, let's turn our attention to browser cookie theft. And here I just have a quick narrated demo that's recorded that'll play so that you get a sense of how this technique works and what the impact of it is. So hopefully the video plays. Yeah. So we start off on a victim machine, and this is where we're going to be actually stealing cookies from. And we're going to be doing this manually through WebSockets. So the first step, we'll start Chrome with the debugging port enabled on port 9333 in this case. And once we do that, we'll see Chrome pop up. and we'll go ahead and browse to the Azure portal just to show that this user is authenticated to the portal. And then once we confirm that, we can actually go ahead and curl the debugging endpoint that we just started. And from here, we'll grab a WebSocket URL, and then we'll just use a WebSocket client, WSC, to go ahead and connect to that WebSocket URL. And then we'll send Chrome a request telling it to return all its cookies back to us. And once we do that, the network.getAllCookies command, we run it, and then Chrome just happily returns back the cookies that it has stored in JSON format. So at this point, we'll copy and paste it, exfiltrate it via OneDrive or Dropbox or something like that, and we'll browse to the attacker machine. And this machine is where we're going to be loading the cookies onto. And as we could see below the notepad window here, that this computer does not have an authenticated Azure session. So we'll go ahead and open up our Cookie Bro extension, browse to the cookie editor, and then we will load the JSON file that we just stole from the victim machine. And once we do that, we'll see that the cookies were imported, all good to go. And once we refresh the Azure portal, it'll complain a little bit. And I think this is due to a time delta. But once we click try again, we will happily be brought to an authenticated Azure portal session on a machine that did not have the credentials. They just had the cookies. And the thing to point out about this too is that depending on how your conditional access policies are set up in your Azure or Entra tenant, this could potentially be an MFA bypass as well. So a pretty impactful technique, and utilizing no third-party tools, all built in. So in the demo, the cookies were stolen from a browser that I just mentioned using tools that are kind of built in and potentially found on a developer's workstation. However, this process can also be automated using tools such as White Chocolate Macadamia Nut, written by Justin Bowie. And I'm going to just go ahead and abbreviate that to WCM going forward because I cannot say that many times over. So we could go ahead and, utilizing a slightly different technique here, again, start a browser in headless mode on a victim machine, have it set on the debugging port of 9333. What we can do then is start an SSH tunnel on that same machine, tunneling that local port out to a remote machine. And then on the attacking machine, we could drop the White Chocolate Macadamia Nut tool and connect to the tunneled port instead to steal the browser cookies. And this avoids dropping an extra tool on the victim host. So again, this kind of demonstrates how stealthy this technique can be, especially when it's combined with network tunneling or proxying techniques. And this also demonstrates nicely why there's lots of telemetry involved from various systems and log channels. All that's kind of required for you to actually go ahead and get your arms around this kind of technique. So from the demo, again, we hopefully got a good sense of the danger of cookie theft and how it can be pulled off using tools that are either typically found on a developer's workstation or using tools like WCM. However, luckily not all detection hope is lost. And most of the tools that I know of rely on Chrome or Edge, Chromium browser, being started with a debugging port or injecting something into the browser process, which are all event IDs and things that we can capture and alert on. And for the technique that we just demoed, we can go ahead and alert on a Chromium process being started with a debugging port, as is seen here in the screenshot. So wrapping up and kind of digging a little bit deeper into browser cookie theft, some event IDs that we need or can at least help us wrangle this technique are object auditing events that I talked about. These are your SACL auditing, process events, including parent process and command line values for best results, events that tie together process to network connections. So your system on event ID 3 or anything with a community ID will be really invaluable here. Process injection events like QueryML thread or system on event ID 10 process access are also really important. In terms of detection strategies, we can use the network events to flag on a network connection that is incoming to the browser instead of the normal outgoing. We can also use SACLs to alert us when a non-browser process touches a history or bookmark file. And as shown in the previous slides, we can also alert on the command line parameters and look for Chromium browsers being started with a debugging port being enabled. And finally, we can look at strange or abnormal processes injecting into our browser processes. And again, a super important step here is the validation step. We can use tools like WCM or Sharp Chrome, along with tools like Seatbelt that perform browser enumeration and system enumeration just to generate telemetry that looks malicious, so that you can compare, what does it look like when Seatbelt enumerates a browser versus when a user just opens Chrome and browses normally. This is a really, really key step to both threat hunting and detection engineering as well. So wrapping up with some action items. The first action item I have here is incorporating token and cookie theft into both your threat models and playbooks. I think that these techniques are a little bit underappreciated by the Blue Team community. And it was really exciting to see another talk about cookie theft, I think, during this conference as well, which I'll have to catch after this presentation. But I'm glad that this is getting a little bit more attention because it's a pretty stealthy and deadly technique from a threat actor point of view. The next action item I have here is exploring and operationalizing data sources that you might not have in your environment currently. These are things like Linux logging. Linux systems tend to be pretty critical to networks. However, they are kind of like set off in the corner and never looked at or spoken about ever. So make sure you have, if you do have Linux systems in your network, that you're getting some kind of telemetry from them. AuditD and Laurel are great tools that you can use here. SACL auditing is super important. We covered that pretty heavily during the presentation. File share auditing as well. File share auditing can tend to be a little bit verbose and a little bit difficult to wrangle, but it is well worth the effort, especially if your network is, Active Directory. And the next couple items here are avoiding tunnel vision. And this is kind of over pivoting on the LSAS memory dumping techniques while having, no detections for cookie theft. Small steps are really important here. So just because you don't have all of these data sources enabled right away, that's okay. Start small. That's perfectly fine. And the last point there is to tabletop/purple team cloud authentication scenarios. Find out how your developers, users, administrators are actually performing cloud authentication from their endpoints. I think the answers here will surprise you. And that is all I had. Thank you very much.
Awesome. No, that was fantastic. And I'm not saying that just because, you're a speaker and you're here, but I love talks where you give actionable things to do. Here's some scripts. Here's some this. Here's some that. Everyone can leave with some tools to go do that. So thank you for taking the time to share those items. Now, we are right up against the next speaker talking. So for those of you who had questions, Anton said before, you can join over in Discord, discord.gg/Antisyphon, and you can go into our August 2023 Summit and the Summit Track 2, where Anton will be joining you shortly to answer any questions. Again, thank you so much for going through all this stuff. So if you'll go ahead and drop off for me, and we'll get Dwayne in here. And Dwayne, there they are. Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Not too shabby. So before we get you started here, like I said, just a couple show notes. Get over into Discord so you can chat with us. Y'all would have heard me just say that. Also, slides as we get them, as talks end or as they've been given to us by the speakers, will be over in Summit Track 2 resources. So Track 2 resources. And if you're here to hear Dr. Catherine Allman, well, this is not Dr. Kathy Allman. She's over in Track 1, so you're going to want to go over there. But you're going to want to stick around, like I've said on previous ones, because Dwayne's going to be here talking to us about what goes there. Actively detecting intruders with honey tokens. And man, is deception not... Deception's got to be the funnest thing for blue teamers, right? Like you actually get to...
Yeah, it's actually doing something active, not just defending, but defending in a way that puts you in, really control of the situation. And that's the whole reason you'd want to do that. Really glad the last speaker just spoke about honey pots and honey potting and certain things, because we'll definitely talk about that. And that's the whole goal here, is to be more active on our blue team defense to get better results. So
yeah, absolutely. So real quick intro here for you. Dwayne here has been working as a developer relations professional since 2015 and has been involved in tech communities since 2005, loves sharing knowledge, and he's done so by giving talks at hundreds of events, currently living in Chicago, and outside of tech, loves karaoke, live music, and performing improv. And Dwayne, we have that in common because I cannot resist props. I cannot resist costumes and improv. So bird of a feather there. But you all don't want to hear from me anymore. The last thing I want to say is if you haven't had a chance to check out the training that's coming up Thursday and Friday, definitely go to antisyphontraining.com. We still have spots available for our virtual training for this summit. Dwayne, are you ready?
I'm ready to go.
Take it away.
All right. So this is my talk. Who goes there? Actually, let me move that around the screen there. Okay. So who goes there? Actually detecting intruders with cyber deception tools. I got a lot of slides, but I'm going to go through them quick. As I was introduced, I live in Chicago. I wanted to give a shout out to the Security Repo podcast, a show I co-host, where we're trying to spread knowledge. We have had Jason Haddix, we've had Tanya Jonka, we've had people talking about outsourcing SOC. So a very wide selection of security topics that we want everybody to know about. Feel free to reach out to me on the socials out there. I'm on Mastodon more than I am Twitter these days, but either way, feel free to reach out to me and talk about anything that I'm trying to cover today, or let's talk about other stuff too. Very quickly, I work for a company called Get Guardian. They'll come back up later because we do make a solution that covers the cyber deception idea. But we're also about hard-coded secrets and finding where those are. But that's not what we're really here to talk about. We're here to talk about the problem of hard-coded secrets and how we can use them to our advantage. They are a real problem. I'm actually going to tell you a couple horror stories here. And if you get scared, like, hey, that could be me, or I lived through that, or I'm just getting nervous, remember to cite the Bene Gesserit Litany Against Fear, and you'll be fine. Only the fear will pass and you'll remain. But Uber had a problem with hard-coded passwords. An attacker got access. We just heard about MFA not being the greatest end-all be-all solution because, well, you can bypass it in certain circumstances. An attacker figured out how they could do that and got through Uber's defenses, fished a super admin's password, got in, found a bunch of PowerShell scripts chock full of hard-coded credentials, and pwned the entire system. We know about this because that attacker went to the New York Times and said, look what I did to Uber, and made them look bad. And stole a bunch of stuff, and we still don't know the full outcome and repercussions of this, to be honest. Circle CI, probably a lot of people in the audience lived through this at the beginning of the year. They woke up to find their access tokens had been rotated, and that caused some problems for people. An attacker had gotten into a development system, a remote developer's development system, got some malware inside of the Circle CI network that started stealing plain text passwords from places. They used that access to then get into customer accounts and start stealing their access tokens for all sorts of services. Not a great day. The day, though, that they announced this, an independent security researcher also tweeted, my honey tokens have gone off inside of Circle CI. Something's going on. I think it was about a 2-hour window between that and the announcement. I don't have a fancy slide for this one, but one of the scarier stories in the last couple of years, and at least to me, is this weird perfect storm that happened where someone from AstraZeneca pushes the credentials for their test environment out into GitHub. Not a huge deal, you might think, because, well, that's a test environment. However, another user had pushed actual patient data into that test environment. They've never said exactly how many people were affected. And if you're one of the people that did get an email from them, I would love to know like what they actually said to you as a customer. Because unlike airline crashes, we don't know. We only know what security teams and PR teams are willing to tell us. What's common about all those is what the attackers did. They gained access. They looked for ways to laterally expand or escalate privileges and get more data. I told a very shortened story, the AstraZeneca story there, but it's all the same: breach, find data, find machine resources, or anything that leads me back. Why data? Starts with an R and ends with an ransomware attacks. There's a lot of money in that. If you read the Verizon DBIR, there's a lot of money in this. Don't go committing crimes. I don't encourage anyone out there, but that's why people are doing it. Machine resources, same exact deal. They want to crypto mine, make that Monero or whatever it is. And that's what they're actually after. They're money motivated. We're not making their job any easier because we keep posting these passwords to places where they shouldn't be. So instead of, hey, I have to break into your vault system or your hardware security module and figure out all that nonsense, well, not nonsense, but that layer of protection, they're just finding their way in and finding, hey, there's all these passwords just laying around. Let's see what they go to. Last year, we found over 10 million secrets just on public GitHub. You can download a report about this. It's about 1 out of 10 committers have committed a password to their code just on public GitHub. In private, it's probably higher than that because you have the perceived safety of there's a private repo. We're in this cat and mouse game where we know how the attackers are going to basically behave. We know what motivates them. This isn't a secret. The research is there. It is organized crime, for the most part, attacking us to get money. Very simple. And we know the pattern. So knowing the pattern, we should be able to set traps that will set off alarms and let us act very quickly. Because on defense, that's the best we can do, is act very quickly and put the attacker on their heel. Remember, these attackers do not have unlimited time and money and bandwidth. If it's too hard, they're going to move on to an easier target. And it's not running the person beside you. It is, hey, let's shut them down. That's, in the right circumstances, alert the appropriate authorities. And that's all work together to make the world a safer place. But that starts with knowing they're there immediately. So, cyber deception, that's what I pitched this as. And that's what it really at the heart of it is. We need to trick the attacker into doing something to give themselves away by putting something alluring out there. And there's a long history of this. We can go back as far, arguably, to the Trojan War. The Trojan horse, about 1200 BCE. Homer is a very hard person to nail down a date on. But yeah, they thought they were getting a big old horse, and inside there was a bunch of defeat. We still use this today. Trojan horses are still a problem, but they've changed and very small and live in our machines now. Art of War, Sun Tzu says it very succinctly: appear weak where you're strong and strong where you're weak. I think this is the plot of one of the Karate Kid movies and definitely one of the Rocky movies. Yeah, we want to mislead and draw the attention away from where our real strengths are and make the attacker do what we want them to do. Ghost Army, if you're not familiar with this story, go look this up. There's a beautiful documentary about this out there. The Ghost Army is a story of us not having enough tanks and planes and bombs and guns to hold North Africa in the early days of World War II. We hired a bunch of artists to make giant inflatable fake tanks like the one you see there, and planes, and played very loud noises in one direction. So from a distance, Rommel's army thought, hey, they're fortifying over here. Meanwhile, we snuck all of our actual military equipment into other ports. And we all know the story of how that ended, or the ending to that story. Let's jump up to computer science, because I know those are a little bit ethereal, but that's, human beings have been doing this stuff for a long time, is my point. Honeypots. So if you don't know the story of honeypots, the Cuckoo's Egg by Cliff Stoll. It's a great read. It's very short, really fast read, I should say. And they made a beautiful Nova special about this in 1990 called The KGB, The Computer Me. That's a screenshot. You can find it on YouTube. Highly recommend you watch it. It's really entertaining. And it's at a level where people really didn't understand what computers were. So it's a very interesting and entertaining episode. But anyway, very long story short, working at a computer laboratory, noticed there's a discrepancy in their billing system, chases it down to find that there's an attacker who is breaking into their system and stealing time, and military sites and stealing their time. Tracks it back to Eastern Germany in 1985, and he keeps hanging up before they can get an exact trace on exactly where this guy is, because how many hops are being made. His girlfriend suggests, well, just put a bunch of fake data on your servers and let them download that, and it'll take them forever. And it did. It took them hours, and enough time passed that they were able to track him down. And it's a great story, espionage, some really weird facts involved in it. But Cliff Stoll is why we have the term honeypot, and thanks to his girlfriend. Fast forward in time a little bit further, Fred Cohen realizes the honeypots should be a standardized approach to security. They've been getting big, but they were very, very self-built and very varied in how people thought about them, put them together. So he puts together TDK, the Deception Toolkit. There's a lot of reading you can do with this, and it goes very, very deep. If you've ever deployed this or used this inside your organization, please hit me up. I would love to talk to somebody that actually used this back in the 90s and get your first person account of it, because all I have is the docs and a couple little videos out there about it. Well, that's cool and all if you have the time and the chops to actually build something like that across your network. But of course, if you can buy it off the shelf, why would you build? And if you're a large organization, we're probably going to at least consider that. Well, that's what Alfred Uger thought. And so he built CyberCop Sting, the first official commercial honeypot solution out there. And this is one of my favorite quotes in all of security is, hackers aren't kids on a digital joyride. Yes, there are hacktivists. Yes, there are people that are just trying to make other websites look bad. Yes, there's international terrorism and nation state actors that are trying to steal secrets. But the majority, and I think it's 80%, according to the Verizon DBIR report, 80% are organized crime. So this is very financially motivated. So using tools to fight back makes a lot of sense. Well, let's keep the conversation going with honeypots. And Augusto, in February 21st, 2003, said in the forum, I've been playing with this idea and I've been calling it honeypots. It's basically data that shouldn't flow over the network. It's something that moves that shouldn't move. So instead of building a whole honeypot, which requires a lot of know-how and equipment, you can just basically tag a file and say, if this moves, anyone opens it, if anyone moves it, let me know. And that's where Honey Token was born. Fast forward in time a little bit more, and there's a lot of conversations around this out in the world. I'm very trying to summarize this as quick as I can. A company called Thinkst out of South Africa releases this particular commit, which adds AWS tokens into their Honey token generator. It's still out there. You can download it yourself, and we'll talk about running it later. They also made it available on their Canary Tokens website eventually. This is where we think the modern definition really takes off of a decoy credential that allows access. Fast forward to this year, I was fortunate enough to be at RSA. The talk that I was sitting through so I could see Eric Idle, who performed next. Yes, that Eric Idle from Monty Python. The person right before him was Kevin Mandia. Might be familiar with his company, Mandiant, Google Cloud. But he really talked to the end about we can build very big defensive walls and fortify our barriers, but we have to prepare for the fact that attackers are eventually going to get in sometimes. It's just a reality. And you can see it down there toward the bottom of his screen. Honey tokens, account bait are one of the ways to protect yourself. And that's really what I want to talk about for the rest of this is what is a honey token, how to build them, where to get them, and how to deploy them. So a honey token has a lot of definitions. Again, we saw it's a piece of data that shouldn't flow. But in the modern setting where we at a Gig Guardian define it as a decoy credential that doesn't allow any access, but instead reveals an IP address while sending you an alert that says someone's in the system, or something has access to that honey token because now it's been publicly exposed. I know that says a little bit different there, but we'll try to sum it up. Very importantly, though, honey tokens need to look identical to real credentials. You get in and it literally reads, this is a trap. No one's going to ever try it. Or you tune in reality, you would tune your grep scripts, your regex to say, hey, if it looks like this, ignore those. Those are obviously traps. So we need them to look very real. That's a very real honey token on the left. I don't think it's active, but you can try if you want. It doesn't actually go to anything. So how do you build these? Well, again, there's a lot of ways to build these. There's a lot of ways to think about these. The way we think about it looks like this, and we released this publicly. This is the GG Canary project. All you need is a little bit of Terraform knowledge and a little bit of AWS knowledge, and you can be building honey tokens to your heart's content right after this presentation, or even during if you really want to get going quick. You won't find this picture in that repo. That's on a blog post over on the Get Guardian website about this repo. But I like this because it explains what we build. So Terraform builds first a set of users, puts those users in a list. Anytime someone tries to access AWS using those credentials, CloudTrail saves those entries into a bucket. A Lambda function checks the entry in the bucket against the list and sends off an alert if it's been used. That alert can look like Slack, AWS, SES, or SendGrid out of the box. And it gives you what CloudTrail gives you, which is IP address, user agent, timestamp, and the action that the user was trying to perform. That's one way to build honey tokens, and you can go build them on your own because you do have a lot of options out there. I want to reiterate, there's not just one way to do this. There might be a one way that works best for your organization, and I encourage you to go and look at the options. The first one is just completely DIY. I showed you the diagram. I've talked about data that doesn't move, going manually setting individual file permissions to set off alarms. There's third-party tools that do things like that inside of Windows and Linux systems. But that's one way to do it. The problem is DIY is, well, it's DIY and you're on your own. There are open source solutions. GG Canary, one I've already talked about. Space Siren is the descendant of Space Crab, which was originally an idea out of Bitbucket that they ended years ago for various reasons won't get into on this call. But it does require some AWS know-how, but it works. Thinkst obviously makes Canary tokens, and you can run it in Docker. You can build it and run it yourself and throw it out in Kubernetes theoretically. But most people don't do that with Thinkst. They use either one-off canarytoken.org, which are not just AWS credentials, but all sorts of interesting things, fake credit cards, fake SQL files. And if you're doing a one-off experiment, it's not a bad way to get started, honestly. I have a few of those floating out there in the world myself. If you want to do that at scale with their tools, they sell that. It's called canary.tools. It's a paid version of what canarytoken.org sells, or canarytoken.org provides. We make the honey token module. It does require you to be a Get Guardian customer. We're just coming out of beta right now. I think it was last week, so I should update this slide. But this cross-references, our honey token cross-references the other data we know about where your hard-coded credentials are throughout your source code and environments to give you a more complete picture of what's exposed if something's leaked or an intruder gets in. Microsoft Sentinel is a product that works on Azure. I have no personal experience with it. If you are someone out there that actually runs this in production, let me know. I would love to talk to somebody that actually does. And CrowdStrike users that are listening, go talk to CrowdStrike reps about what they offer as far as honey tokens. I'm not a CrowdStrike customer personally, so I don't know, but it's in their docs and there is a blog post about it, but that's all I really know, but it is an option. So what do you do with these? You built your honey token, but how do you use them? Well, put them in your private environments. Everybody's probably just thinking up front, let's put them in our code first. And that's, I think, the best place to initially put them based on how attackers behave. Get in, look through any files you can find, generally version code, and look for some kind of credentials. They're not going to do this by hand. For the most part, we saw how to use a tool like TruffleHog or GG Shield is the thing we make to look for secrets. You can do that for good purposes, for blue teaming purposes through your code, but it works both ways. Someone else can use those same tools to go find all of your secrets if they have access to your code base. But the act of scanning often involves a validation step. That validation step is what actually is going to trigger, hey, let's go try to use this real quick and return if this is valid. So we're not going to waste any time. So if we find 1,000 credentials, but none of them return valid, we know we really don't have anything. There's nothing I can exploit in that particular repo, move on to the next one. However, if they scan and it triggers, wait a minute, now I have an attacker that I need to deal with. Cut that dwell time down to minutes, not days. But they don't have to just go in your code. They can go inside your CI environment settings. documentation that's private, anything that's private, and that's very important. Your Jira instances, your Slack messages, put them in Vault. If you put it in your Vault system where you're storing all of your passwords effectively, I use Vault very broad here. So HashiCorp Vault, of course, is one of the main players that everybody knows about in secrets management, but there are many others. Azure Key Vault, whatever Amazon Secret Manager is, I think it's just Amazon Secrets, Google Cloud, they all have some form of a vault. Put them in there, because if that goes off, you have some serious problems. Now, someone that's getting access that shouldn't have access to that particular key probably has access to everything else in there. And that's a major issue you're going to need to deal with immediately. When you're putting these out there, use a 1-to-1 ratio. Don't use the same honey token across all your code bases, because if it goes off, which one did it go off in? Which repo got compromised? Keep it simple. At scale, you can do these. If you're building one off, it's a little tedious, but the commercial providers offer scale solutions that let you script against it. So use a little bit of logic to, hey, let's build a half-formed Terraform file. Looks like I abandoned halfway through the project, stuff it in the middle of my repo, forget about it, walk away. No legitimate reason it should be there. Maybe a test or two will say, what is this in there? But generally, you just want to leave them alone. And then when they go off, you say, hey, well, that's the environment that got affected. That's where it got leaked, or that is what someone has intruded into. I mentioned just a second ago, I kind of got ahead of myself, but automate, scale this stuff up. A little bash or Python scripting goes an awful long way. I built an example. I'm kind of embarrassed by it because it's not really well documented, but if you want to go see just the bare logic of how you would build these, that I actually used against my own personal repos, private repos, well, they're there. Think in terms of blue team with this. Unless you are specifically a law enforcement agent, and I have given this talk where there have been law enforcement agents in the room, this is a blue team thing. You are trying to get them out of your network. You are guarding your gates. You're guarding your treasures, your holy grails. You're not hunting them down. There is a very gray line you can cross almost immediately, unless you're a researcher who has gotten the right permissions. It starts getting tricky, especially with international laws and treaties. So know that you're going to use this data to protect yourself. It's very easy and tempting to put on a red team hat or a gray hat and start thinking, oh, let's get these people back. Used for defense. And this is a journey. I've heard this several times today to remind you that it's okay to not be completely done with the project tomorrow. Security is a long, never-ending journey. Even if you think, I'm going to get everything right this year, you still have to deal with the new vulnerabilities and threats and exploits that are emerging right now. That's never done. So start with one repo, start with one environment, start with one little test project, and grow it from there. I only have one do not, and this is a pretty big one. Do not purposefully put honey tokens in public places. Why? Because they'll go off almost immediately. It's fun to do for a little experiment. I'll grant you that. To see, hey, where am I being attacked? Let's throw one of our public repos. Let's throw a honey token out there and see how fast AWS scans it, how fast GitGuardian scans it, how fast Google scans it, how fast some random IPs out of Indonesia or India or somewhere else in the world scans it. But the whole point of honey tokens is to give you an alert that someone's doing something they shouldn't. Those scanners are working as intended. So all you're proving is the internet gets scanned if you put them in public on purpose. On the other hand, if you put them in a private repo and all of a sudden a public scanner hits it, you have a leak on your hands. How did it get public? Is the actual private repo now exposed, or has someone made a clone and pushed to a different repo? That happens more than you think. We think that it's a good chunk of those 10 million credentials we found were people accidentally doing that. So wrapping up here in the last couple of minutes, we're this constant cat and mouse game, but we know how they're going to behave. We know the MO. Breach, however they can, whether it's an exploit, a 0-day exploit, whether it's phishing someone's account, whether it's walking through and do some social engineering to find a password to something. But once you're in, it's always laterally expand, escalate privileges in order to laterally expand and escalate privileges until you either have made the money you need to make, ransom what you need to ransom, or done the nefarious thing you wanted to do. But we can use that to our advantage because we know that's going to always happen. Laying traps out there. I laid out multiple ways to accomplish honey tokens or honeypots. Honeypots are their own field in themselves that are really probably worth your time. You don't have to do this on your own. You can. There's a lot of blog posts. There's a lot of architecture diagrams out there about various ways to do this, but there are options right off the shelf if you have an enterprise to protect and have more money than time. Remember that you are not a law enforcement agent unless you are. So keep yourself out of trouble with this data and use it for good to defend. So again, I'm Dwayne. I live in Chicago. Go catch the Security Repo podcast. We got some awesome guests coming up in the next couple of weeks. And hit me up on social if you have any questions. I'm NC Dwayne pretty much everywhere, including GitHub. So with that, I will stop. And it looks like we have a couple minutes for questions.
Yeah, no. So no questions in the Q&A right now, but there was a lot of good chatter over in the Discord. But basically people dropping links and whatnot related to what you were saying. So I think it really resonated with a lot of folks. And personally, I love how much you got into the tokens piece, and then specifically how you got that the additional pieces that you're tying in. You had a slide up there that said like, hey, here's how you integrate, here's how you make this into your workflow. And I think like it was the alerting. It was like, get this into Slack, get this into Teams. I think that alone is worth the price of admission, which of course is free, but it was worth the price of admission because too many people are like, oh, we're going to put this tool out there, but they don't know how to operationalize it. How do we turn this into something that we can actually use? So this was wonderful. What I will do, if there's anyone with any questions that wants to jump into Discord now and throw them in, great. If not, we've got our next speaker coming up. So Dwayne, thank you so much for joining us. I love how all these Blue Team talks have been very active. It's not just sit back and wait. It's here's the things you can do to make your life better. So thank you for joining us. If you could go over to Discord, you have some moments to chat with the folks there. We're over in discord.gg/Antisyphon, August 2023 Summit and Summit Track 2. Dwayne, again, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Oh, and we have John Stoner coming up. John, I see your slides. Are you in the sound of my voice?
I can hear the sound of your voice. I'm just trying to make
Excellent.
sure my screen all looks all together there.
Wonderful. All right. So again, everyone, welcome. This is our Blue Team Summit. You are in track 2, and we're about to talk to John Stoner and learn. I want a log. I want the log I can't have. And boy, isn't that always the truth. The one that you want is the one that you don't have. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about this talk. But we are in track 2. John Stoner's coming up. If you're looking for Kelly Tarali, you need to be over in track 1. But as I've said many times before, you want to stick around in track 2. Track 2 is the best track. It's where all the things are happening. We've got folks over here. They know what's up. So you want to stick around here. But if you are looking for Kelly, go over there. Also, as I mentioned, join us over in Discord. We're in the Antisyphon Discord, Summit Track 2. And you can chat there. We'll also have resources up there with your slides. Now, one quick show note here. If we don't have time for questions at the end, John, will you be able to join us in that Discord afterwards in case we don't get to all the questions or chat with folks?
Absolutely. I think I've got this a little bit chock full, so I will definitely be over there afterwards.
Perfect. And then also, don't forget, folks, we're doing free talks today. But tomorrow, we have more of our Antisyphon training. And you can go to www.antisyphontraining.com and check out the classes that we're running on Thursday and Friday. You know, that pays the bills, lets us do this fun free stuff. But moreover, it's about our mission to log, if you will, because here we are, Blue Team, ready to log, and we want to make sure that you got free low-cost training. It's low-cost, high-quality training available to you. So go check those out at antisyphontraining.com. I think that's about enough for me, though. I just want to do a quick introduction for you. So, John, you are the global principal security strategist at Google Cloud. I do not envy your role at that scale, but I'm glad you're doing it. They leverage their experience for users' capabilities in security operations, threat hunting, incident response, threat intelligence. You blog regularly on threat hunting, security operations, and has built multiple APT threat emulations for Blue Team Capture the Flag events. That's really cool. At some point, I'd love to talk with you about how you do that at scale. Different conversation, but you've been at different industry symposia, including first CTI Tech how do you say colloquium?
Yeah.
Did I get that right?
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. B-Sides, San Francisco and Las Vegas, SAN Summits, WISIS, Way West, our conference, Wild West Hacking Fest, Way West, DEF CON Packet Hacking Village. And yeah, when you're not doing that, you enjoy listening to what his former teammates referred to as 80s sad timey music. Oh, so we got a lot of The Cure in your playlist?
We also have the Smiths.
The Smiths, yeah, there you go. All right, so wonderful. John, again, thank you for being here. Take it away for us.
Great, thank you. All right, yeah, so you've heard a little bit about me, but what I want to kind of talk about today is talking about this need or that want to have that specific log that unfortunately we don't have. And so this kind of ties in my 80s sad timey music with some of the adversary emulation work that we did with APT actors. So let me take you back in time to kind of where this started. And this goes back a few years, but this is when Mandiant and Microsoft, many of you probably remember this, when there was this supply chain attack that was reported using the tool SolarWinds, and it kicked off a thing called Solargate, however you want to pronounce it. And it combined a couple of different things. It combined this unique supply chain attack, right, which kind of got into this initial access into these environments. But the other part of this attack was also this novel piece where Active Directory, from Azure perspective, was attacked using the Active Directory Federation Services, or ADFS, right, which allowed you to kind of log into a Windows AD server and basically kind of proxy your connection, for lack of a better way to describe it, I don't want to oversimplify it, up into the cloud. And so that was a unique attack vector. The other part about this was that MFA could be driven around, right? We didn't have the little pop-up with my little my phone to be able to validate me. I could just kind of just go right through that. And you started hearing the term golden SAML, which was originally coined by CyberArk in 2017, start actually gaining some traction, okay? So fast forward a couple months, I'm sitting down, I'm working through trying to build a APT scenario for a Blue Team CTF. And I thought, hey, wouldn't it be fun to go ahead and emulate something like this, right? You rip from the headlines kind of thing. And I started thinking about it and envisioning, and I'm like, man, I can go ahead and have all sorts of telemetry, because when you build a CTF, you want to have telemetry, right? So, hey, if I have the telemetry, I can write all sorts of great questions for users. They can go ahead and get familiar with cloud environment and the on-prem and the pivot and everything else, and wouldn't that be great? So I sit down, I build my tests, I do my unit testing. I'm not really focused actually on the logs because I kind of feel like I'm in pretty good shape with the logs. And I build the supply chain compromise piece of it, and that was a little light, but that wasn't my focus. Build the on-prem piece. I've got Zeek, I've got insider threat data, I've got Sysmon, I got all this kind of stuff. I build the pivot, right? That took a little bit of learning curve on my part, and I'll talk about that in a bit, to get into the Azure piece. But I get into Azure and I do my cloud attack, and we didn't do tons of stuff in cloud, but just kind of prove out that we could do this and grab some roles and pull some information, etc. And I was feeling good about that. I sit down to start writing my questions, and I start going through the data that I've got. Man, on-premise I am set. But what about that cloud stuff? All of a sudden, I kind of looked like this guy. I was busy pointing. I'm saying, the landmark down the street over here, I saw that. And I saw the landmark over here to the right, and I saw that. But I had this very, very sinking feeling about this. And I said, well, wait a second. Did I misconfigure my Splunk instance, right? Did I not pull in the right logs? Am I missing something? Well, the show kind of goes on for the CTF. So, kind of set that aside and built with it what I had, okay? But post-CTF, I went back and I'm like, well, let me go ahead and try this. And I was a little bit tinfoil hatty and a little bit concerned about this. So I said, you know what? Let me go ahead and rerun my emulation in Sentinel and see what I get. And I ran the emulation in Sentinel again, and I kind of saw the same things I saw in Splunk. And I'm like, okay, so maybe it's not me. I talked to Dave Cowan, who was the SANS Forensic 509 cloud course author, about Azure data. And I kind of got a vibe from him that, I'm probably not far off on what I saw in Splunk and in Sentinel. Fast forward, I'm at the Way West Hacking Fest. I'm talking about building adversary emulation on a Friday afternoon. I do my presentation. I'm all kind of set to kind of put this thing away and put it to the side. And, I asked for people for questions. And honestly, most of the questions I got was kind of about the logging associated with this and what you could see and what you couldn't see. And I'm like, well, you know what? I talked about emulation, but maybe I need to kind of dial back and look at this specific issue. So I kind of resuscitated this. I moved over to Google Cloud. So I revisited this in Chronicle after I kind of got settled down and got a feel for things. I even went ahead and spun up another Splunk instance and looked at it from there. And what I saw across all of these different times running similar scenarios, it's not exactly the same, but the similar concepts, is that I saw some subtle changes over time, kind of like a cloud in the sky, right? The cloud changes a little bit over time, but overall, the same kinds of stuff are there. And that's kind of one of the big takeaways of this talk. Okay. Now, I'm using the Golden SAML attack kind of as the case study, so to speak, right? Because not everybody's going to be impacted by this. I'm using this to highlight this because once you get into the cloud, that's kind of where the meat of all of this is. But if you do happen to have Golden SAML ADFS, hopefully you can take some things away from this. Microsoft's driving migration to Azure Active Directory. Okay, you can see videos on that Microsoft putting together. They really want people off of ADFS for reasons that have been well documented and things I'll touch on today. But legacy applications can't move overnight, and so we're kind of stuck in this space where the Microsoft Graph and the API that touches, Azure and Office 365 and all of the pieces of the Microsoft Cloud environment are out there, but there's also these ways that you can kind of steer through them and get access to different pieces of this. So what I feel like is it's very important to understand what Azure will tell you in terms of logging, and from key changes out there, it does a pretty good job. But if you are a defender coming from an on-premise environment, and you're kind of focusing on this brave new world of cloud, the fidelity of the data that you're going to get from that cloud provider may not be the same that you are used to in your environment where you're setting up a Sysmon and a Zeek and event logging and GPOs and all of those kinds of things. Because if we're going to go ahead and defend in the cloud, write detections in the cloud, and detect, we need to understand this terrain that we're going to be in. Okay? And that's kind of where we're coming from with this. But we're going to use Golden SAML as our example. So to kind of prove this out, I stood up a Windows 2022 Active Directory running ADFS, kind of the latest and greatest, right? So, previously I used other versions of this, but I wanted to make sure I kind of used, everything that they had that was the latest off the shelf, okay? At scale, this would probably be distinct systems, AD servers, federation servers, all linked together. For my purposes, I collapsed them all in together, okay? I was able to configure ADFS, which is not particularly easy and maybe a separate talk unto itself in terms of how to secure this thing. But Microsoft, and there's lots of other sites out there that talk about how to configure this and get it working and communicating. So that was great. Stood up multiple systems and users tied into this environment. I used Azure AD Connect to go ahead and handle that federation between Active Directory and Azure AD. Well, you'll see me say, or you'll probably hear me say low to high. I'm kind of thinking low being on-premise, high being cloud. Okay, but basically the idea here is that every single user who would access the Azure and M365 environments would log in through the ADFS portal and basically be granted access after they used multi-factor authentication to get into those Azure resources. Okay. The other thing I want to call out is Roberto Rodriguez had built this concept called the Simulan project, and it's out there on GitHub. And it was incredibly helpful for me to understand the initial stages of the attack around the key theft piece of this and some pointers as to how to emulate this with PowerShell. And that was a really big step for me kind of getting this thing off the ground to go through and do a lot of the work that I was doing here for this. So big thanks there. Now, another key piece that if you walk away with nothing else and you were talking about needing to monitor your MSS Cloud environment, what are some things I could be logging? Well, Azure AD sign-in logs, that's one thing you would definitely want to log. Azure AD audit logs, that's kind of like, hey, I added a key, I created an app. You'll see more about those things in a bit. That's where you'd log that. Office 365 has some robust logging. They actually have their own Azure AD audit, which is a little bit confusing that you have Azure AD audit for Azure Active Directory and you have Azure AD audit for O365. But that's okay. We'll talk about those things. Good thing to have both. SharePoint Exchange, both have their own audits. There's general audit, which is kind of a catch-all, and then there's DLP if you're using that. And then the security alerts that you have within Microsoft Cloud come out through the Graph API. So like the Advanced Threat Protection, ATP, some of the other kinds of things that you can do, they'll come out through the Graph API. Now, there's also potential sources of noise in this environment. if you're using Azure AD Connect to do that synchronization from that low to high, if you will, those things happen on a regular basis, which is great. So if a user gets created down low, the user gets created up in the cloud. That's a user added event that you want to see. However, you're also going to see all the extra noise going back and forth as it's doing its synchronization. So that's something you kind of have to filter through. The Security Compliance Center Data Insights app inside of the Microsoft Cloud, I found this to be incredibly noisy. That may have been my lack of knowledge about it to be able to tune it, but over the time that I played with this over a couple of years, I kind of got one useful alert out of it. So it'd be something I would probably look to either better configure, figure out actually what I can do with it, or just scratch the whole thing, because otherwise it's just noise that I have to filter through. All right, so let's talk about the attack path that we're going to go through. This is kind of a 5-step attack path. There is one step that is on premise, okay, so that's the ADFS attack. And then there's the pivot into the cloud, which is the rest of it, okay? We'll talk about ways that we can go ahead, kind of talk about the attack, talk about things that we can do to defend against the different portions of the attack, and understand what the logging implications are throughout all of this. All right, so for the first piece, we need to go ahead and grab the key, the SAML token, right? So this attack, this portion of the attack, would be handled with a local admin account and the ADFS service account. And I guess for the good news for folks that are focused on defending the on-premise environment is this is where your classic hunting, detection, and monitoring would take place. Things like your Sysmon, things like your EDR, things like Zeek, right? All of those pieces, PowerShell logging, things that you probably are comfortable with in that perspective. There's also a lot of really good content that's already out there for defending your ADFS environment. I especially wanted to point out and call out again Roberto and Nestori. Nestori is the author of the AAD Internals app, which I'll mention a little bit down the road. And actually, we're going to be using it. They did a deeper dive into ADFS attacks and detections, right? So again, if I'm looking to defend at the point to prevent the key from being stolen in the first place, I would definitely look at their link in their documentation, in their talk. Definitely a good place to be looking at to understand more about that part of the attack itself. Additionally, Microsoft has put out some guidance around what they are trying to do to help mitigate some of these problems. And there's a little bit of a word soup there. I went and highlighted a couple of keywords here. But the long and short of this newer Graph API setting that you can set up in your cloud environment to help prevent your keys from being stolen off of your ADFS server is basically, hey, we recommend that you force Active Directory multi-factor authentication every single time, right? So you can't bypass it. So basically what we're saying is if you're using ADFS, you need to turn this on so that you can prevent people from bypassing the multi-factor authentication. That's what the setting's basically about. That was in some documentation that Microsoft has that I'll share at the end here. All right, so visibility into this attack. I could go ahead and generate a PowerShell script that would allow me to steal the token, steal the TFX certificate, enumerate the domain admins and any other users within the environment, as well as object GUIDs, okay? Now, of course, I could be monitoring for script block logging. I could be looking for creation and exfiltration events. I could be looking for the local pipe creation because the ADFS has a local Windows internal database that you would connect to be able to get at this information. So I could be looking for some of these things as well. There's some audit rules that you could employ that generate some Graph API alerts and some other kinds of pieces there. So there is some visibility into this on-premise part of the attacks, and that's a good thing, okay? However, if those PFX keys get exfiltrated, everything else we're going to talk about in the remaining 15 minutes of our time here is using an external system, okay? So all the visibility that you would have is then limited to what the cloud provider is providing you from a visibility perspective, because this becomes more of a SaaS type of an attack. Okay, so the keys are gone. I would want to go ahead and create a SAML token and create an access token using the SAML token. So to create my own SAML key, I basically need 4 pieces of information. I need to know what your tenant is. Okay, using AAD internals, I can go ahead and issue a call against your domain and get your tenant ID. That query is not something that's going to be logged in the graph, at least not in something that you could see. Okay, so I can go out and go ahead and say, hey, tell me your domain, give me the tenant ID. You would not see that. The object GUIDs. The object GUIDs are something I went ahead and exfiltrated when I grabbed the PFX key, right? That was stuff I took off of the ADFS server. That would be my users, right? I'm going to use those to craft a SAML token. Once I have those GUIDs, I can impersonate whoever I want to. I have my PFX certificate, And then finally, I need an issuer. The issuer, just running a get ADFS properties at the server, would go ahead and give me that information. Again, I could put that in my PowerShell script to grab all those pieces of information. Once I have those pieces of information for my SAML token, I need to build an access token. Now the access token is logged. It's a logged event. But notice here I've got two different log events, one for Tim and one for Heather. They are my two domain admins, right? Because I swapped the GUID in for my SAML token, I can log in as Tim, I can swap it out, build another SAML token, create the access token for Heather. Doesn't matter. Everything else is the same. I'm logging into an app called Azure Active Directory PowerShell, which is a system externally system viewed app that's there for a specific purpose, but obviously could be abused in this circumstance. The other thing I want to call out there is notice that I have a successful login event, and it says MFA requirements are satisfied by claim. Notice I didn't do anything with my phone, I didn't do any multi-factor authentication, but I have that SAML certificate. I didn't flip that newer API setting on, and so I just drove right by it. So if I want to go ahead and detect or look at things to kind of say, hey, what's happening here? This Azure app, Active Directory PowerShell, or Azure Active Directory PowerShell, isn't something I would expect to see people logging into on a regular basis. So if I see that and that published app ID being utilized over and over again, that's something I probably want to push on. Okay. All of the login events from Azure, whether it's O365 logins or Azure logins, have IP addresses in them. Your mileage varies in other parts of the logging, but in the sign-in logs, that's always there. Obviously, I could start doing some login analysis from that perspective. And then I also want to look at some trailing activity after the login happens, which is what we're going to talk about next. Once I get in and I have an access token, if I want to be able to go ahead and do some stuff, I need to go ahead and set up some permissions. So I need to configure access within Azure itself. Okay. To do that, I can do one of two things. I can go ahead and create an application, or I can go ahead and leverage an existing application. Again, from a landmark perspective, creation of applications, creation of service principals, those are separate logged events. They happen. If I do it in the UI, they happen together, but there's two separate logged events. If I script it, I can create one, but then have to do the other as well. But again, it's all things that are logged along the way. Okay. From a permission perspective, there are a published set of permission references. I have the reference link there. They are outputted in GUIDs. So this allows me to go ahead and say, what are the permissions that this request, this access token is going ahead and gathering into the application. Now you might be thinking, why do I need to have permissions in applications? Well, the permissions and applications are kind of a key thing that any tool is using to be able to gather logging. I can tell you from my perspective, if I want to go ahead and gather O365 and Azure logs in Chronicle, I'm going to have an app that I'm going to pull this information through. I can tell you Splunk does the same thing. I can tell you Zscaler has application configuration because I found their application in setup instructions to go ahead and integrate with Azure, right? So this app and permission structure is a very, very common thing within Azure. Okay. The last step of my process here is around administrative consent, easy for me to say, or delegated permissions. There are two different kinds of grants. You can have an application, or you can an application permission or delegated permission. For the purpose of this attack, we're using delegated permissions, but obviously you might be able to go ahead and do some other kinds of things with application permission. I just haven't played around with that. From this perspective, I can also have a logged event. So when I say, hey, I want to go ahead and give administrative consent for the directory read write all, it's going to go ahead and create a logged event there. Now notice here, it's actually spelling out the specific permissions that you're getting these delegated permission grants for as well. But not all permissions require that admin consent. You can see them on the UI. Some of them say yes, some of them say no. That's also in the documentation. What I want to highlight about this configure access piece is that I need to have permissions and administrative grants to really do the next couple things and really get at the data. But you'll notice that if I look at this from an API perspective, the creation of an app, the service principal, and the admin consent are all posts in the API. The permissions are a patch. However, if I wanted to enumerate the applications that are out there, if I want to enumerate the permissions, those are gets. Those gets are not logged in the Graph API. So if I get in there with an access token, I start poking around your environment to say, hey, tell me what applications are out there. Tell me what permissions I have. Until I actually create something or add a permission, those things are not logged, at least not to the defender to be able to see that reconnaissance happening, right? And so that's a big difference than things that we're normally used to. All right. So if I wanted to start monitoring and pushing on this one, where could I be looking? Well, from an application perspective, I probably want to know what applications should be in my Azure environment. Having a fairly tight leash on that would probably be a good thing, but don't count on application creation being a sign of badness or the absence of it being a sign of goodness, right? The service principle, I didn't see a lot of things I could really extract off of that, but the permission assignment's a powerful one, right? I have a list of GUIDs. I could go ahead and be looking for greedy permission grabs. I could be looking for somebody coming back more and more and adding more and more permissions. I could be looking for specific permissions around specific parts of the Graph API that people are going after. So those are all good things to be able to pivot on. Similarly, the delegated permission grant with admin consent, both for Azure AD and O365, put that out in Word, so it's kind of friendly for somebody to look at versus a GUID. But, that's another place I could be looking. But I really like the permission assignment as being a place to kind of really hone in on there. So once I get through, now I want to establish persistence. Why do I want to establish persistence? Well, we talked about that Azure Active Directory PowerShell being a system exposed app, and if I keep coming back to that over and over, that might be suspicious. But what I can do inside of an app is I can create a client secret or a certificate or a federated credential. Client secret's kind of the lowest lying thing. It's the easiest thing to do because those access tokens that I have are only good for 60 to 90 minutes. Microsoft says it averages 75. I can tell you, having played around with this a number of times, yeah, that's pretty much it. So I need to recharge that token, if you will, from time to time. Well, what's a good way to recharge that token? Well, creating a client secret. Okay, and then when maybe my initial access ends, I can go ahead and recreate my SAML token. Okay, and I say recreate because maybe I want to log in as a different person. If I've got object GUIDs, I could go ahead and switch out the object GUID for Tim for Heather, or maybe just some other random user because I'm looking at the CEO's information or the CFO's information and put their object GUID in instead and log in as them. I encode the SAML token. I log into my app this time, right, rather than the PowerShell app. I go ahead and use the client secret that I just created, and I get a new access token that's good for another 75 minutes. That's all very easily scripted. And the reason I say it's very easily scripted is I was able to script it. So if I can script it, you can script it. Anybody can script it. The login event looks something like this. Everything else is pretty much the same. The pieces I highlighted is on the right-hand side was the original system login that I went through the Azure Active Directory PowerShell, and it has that known app ID. On the left is my app that I created or that I leveraged within the victim environment, and it has its own app ID. Otherwise, everything is the same unless I decided to change to a different user. And I'm in. Okay. What could I do with this? Well, from a client secret perspective, I could probably want to be looking and saying, do I expect as a matter of policy client secrets being created inside of apps? Client secrets, just like everything else, is a landmark, right? That's created, that's a logged event. So you'll see that, right? There are expirations you can set on those secrets. Maybe you're looking for extensively long time frames on those, right? That might be something to consider as well. Looking for anomalous logins to certain apps, right? That's not going to happen day one, but if you have apps that are set up through the environment for specific purposes, and all of a sudden maybe there's some permission changes to them and somebody's logging into those apps that aren't generally being utilized in the past, that might be something to look at as well, right? So we start getting into anomalous logins, which again is something we probably do on premise, but we're doing it in a different way in the cloud. Okay. The last part of this is the actions on objective. And so, for time's sake, I'm probably not going to go through all of the different examples here, but I'll kind of hit some high level points around this. I started off writing this slide and making a very declarative statement saying no visibility into the GET commands to the API. And then I had to stop and I put a little asterisk next to that because I wanted to kind of adjust that ever so slightly. Okay. Once I'm into the system and I want to say, tell me who the users are in my Azure environment, that's not a logged event. If I wanted to say who are the ones with the global admin role, not a logged event. If I want to say which token am I using, what mailbox rules does this user have, who are the contacts, who are their calendars, what does their license look like, what are their OneNote pages, tell me about the folder and file structure that they have. None of those things are logged. If I say enumerate the mail messages, the message IDs, however, are enumerated, right? So I get the output, I can see the subject lines and maybe the body of the emails. The defender will get message IDs being enumerated. Okay, so there's visibility there. If I go ahead and preview your OneNote page, okay, you're not necessarily going to say, hey, it was this page in the notebook, but it'll be, projects.1. So it'll tell you that. So it's not an absolute nothing, but it's not as much of that visibility that maybe we would come to expect as people start poking around in our environments. If you go ahead and add somebody to a role, And this is kind of goes into these continual changes that are happening out there. In the let me slide that out of the way. There we go. If you get into the roles, right? Roles will log, right? So I add somebody as an exchange administrator or a global admin. Those things are logged all the time. But privilege identity management was something that got added into Azure AD Audit since April of 2023. So this is, again, I still see these things that are happening in the logs themselves. This was not a configuration change. This started just appearing to me a few minutes after those kinds of things are executed in the environment. So that was a new thing. I just thought that was an interesting thing to call out, that Microsoft decided to add that in, because I didn't make a configuration change to accommodate that. Roles, much like everything else, have known GUID IDs, right? So if you care about the Exchange admin being given to somebody, or the SharePoint admin given to somebody, or the global admin, absolutely security admin as well, right? Those different GUIDs, I would absolutely want to be monitoring for those changes as well. But the enumeration pieces aren't there, so you really need to focus on those change events, those adds, deletes, and everything else. Which brings us to this. O365 logs a heck of a lot of different things, both on the user creation and the Azure pieces of this, as well as obviously the O365 pieces. OneDrive does log quite well. If I was trying to read a file, download, upload, move, delete, folder creation, create a share, anonymous share used, those are all loggable events. So that was really good. Actually, I was pretty happy with that. The Graph API doesn't do a lot of things. It does a lot of that security ATP kinds of stuff or some security events. I went ahead and kind of, had a security event trigger, and I went in and went ahead and updated it, marked it as a false positive, and closed it out. That was the older API for Windows security event. That would generate a Graph API alert, but there's some other things that are happening there as well. Whoop. From a visibility perspective, you're probably thinking, well, if I'm going to monitor these environments, what kinds of data should I monitor with? If you have one choice, O365 is the way to go. Realistically, though, you want to hedge your bets and utilize all four of these that I've listed here. The Azure sign-ons are going to be duplicative of O365, but that's okay. You never know if something else is going to change and get added. The Azure Active Directory audits is a little bit different, but pretty close. The PIMs were one little different thing. If I was doing this to scale, the Graph API would be Pluto, O365 would be the Sun, but there's still good stuff coming out of the Graph API. At the end of the day, what's important to understand is that we're accustomed to have CRUD, right? Create, read, update, delete. Really, we have a duck. We have delete, update, and create, okay? The adversary can build this stuff. They can test it out. They can script it. They can go ahead and attack much more seamlessly, I guess is probably the best way to put it. And that recon stuff that we're kind of used to in our on-premise environments just really isn't quite there as much as we might be used to. This also makes the damage assessments tough, because we kind of have to assume that once we see one thing happening, all of the other things are potentially compromised at that point. And so that's a little bit tricky. Lots of additional reading you can check up on. I highly recommend all of these different pieces around this to learn more, particularly if you're using ADFS in the environment, but lots of other goodness there just to kind of keep your eyes on. And I know I'm about at time. I wanted to thank everybody. You can find me on all of these different places. Happy to engage with anybody. I'll also be in the room afterwards. But this was fantastic, and look forward to chatting with you further about this. Thank you.
Yeah. Am I there? There I am. Hello. No, thank you, John. Thank you for going through that. I mean, I was actually commenting over in the Discord that the track 2 talks, often sometimes you get into blue team talks and it's like, oh, you should do this. The amount of technical detail that you and our other speakers are bringing is actually pretty fantastic. So thank you for taking the time to kind of really break all that down and where to get the logs that you're missing, the logs that you really, really want. So like you said, you're going to be over in Discord, over in Summit Track 2 and Antisyphon Training to go over there and answer questions, because we did have one from Vivek, so we'll start with that. Maybe you can jump in there and answer for them. But okay. Is there a way to detect this access token theft? Does the token recharge happen from the same IP address? So I'll leave you to go answer that over in Discord while we get Amanda and Jeremy and those folks all up here. So again, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, I see Jeremy. I see Ms. Berlin, but that's Brian's bit, not me. Hello, how are you?
Fantastic. How are you?
Fantastic. That's Jeremy. Doing well. We've got our, I've got my knuckles here.
Nice.
So you know me. I got. It's like, oh, can you get props on a costume? Yeah, of course. Absolutely.
I figured you were just wearing that today. I didn't
Yeah,
know
this
it
is
was
just what I wear
a
to work.
costume.
Absolutely. This is just normal.
Yeah.
So yeah, so let's do some introductions real quick as we start here, because we've got a longer session. We're going to go an hour with you two. And so if you're here, though, looking for Alyssa Torres talking about Big Mad Blue Team, you're in the wrong place. You need to go over to track 1. But I love Alyssa, but you want to stay in track 2. This is where the cool kids are.
She's pretty
So,
great.
yeah. You can go over there to track 1 if you're looking for that. But Amanda and Jeremy here are going to be talking about leveling up, mastering the game of threats through tabletops and bots. So Amanda here, I'll do some quick introductions here. Amanda is the lead of incident detection engineering for Blumera and the CEO and owner of nonprofit corporation Mental Health Hackers, which has the coolest challenge coin I currently have in my possession. She is the author of the Blue Team Best Practices book called Defensive Security Handbook. Definitely check that out for best practices for securing infrastructure with Lee Brostrom through O'Reilly Media. Co-host of Breaking Down Security. That was the Miss Berlin bit. That's Brian's bit. So definitely check them out there. I used to listen when I was jogging. I need to do that more. And then, of course, she spent over a decade in different areas of technology, triage, and design, and now spends time creating meaningful alerts. Now, over here we got Jeremy, who has an expertise with the evolution of security convergence, the merger of the physical and information security and cyber warfare, security information officer within local government, and the principal within Code Red LLC. Previously working at Fortune 500 enterprises, doing physical security training, and contracting. And then you also research and test small UAVs, drones, quadcopters, things like that. So, and then of course likes to rely on open source intelligence, or OSINT. Welcome both. How are you?
Thanks for having us. I'm
doing
fantastic.
Definitely doing great here. I didn't know you're gonna read that entire out. We should give
I wasn't sure if I was or not.
I liked the convergence part. I think that's
yeah.
I feel like that's new, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You gotta
I like the
converge.
converge.
You have to go through, and every so often you have to change your paradigms. Make sure you change those out, and synergize the convergence.
Yeah,
and you're good.
definitely.
What is it before we hand off to you? What is it? The take bank? What is that in the background, Jeremy? The take.
I was trying to figure out what that said too. The bag.
Yeah.
Is it
the bag there. The take.
Bag?
Don't worry about the bag. All right?
Oh, don't worry about the bag. Okay. We don't talk about the bag.
It's moving, isn't it?
It's his bag. It's his bag, baby. So anyway, I'm going to hand off to y'all, because you're going to talk about something near and dear to my heart, which is running tabletop exercises. And we're looking forward to hearing everything you have to say. But before I drop off, if people have questions, since this is a longer one, should they shoot them into Q&A? Would you like me to interrupt you? Or do you want to do questions at the end?
We can take them live. So I have the Discord up, and I can pay attention to chat. And the fact that there's 2 of us makes it easy. So we kind of go back and forth and answer what we can. So
cool. So fire your questions away at them in Discord and in our Q&A here. And if you're not in Discord, get over there. Discord.gg/Antisyphon. We're in the August 2023 Summit and in the Summit Track 2 channel. I think that's about it. Other than that, definitely go check out antisyphontraining.com, and we've got another summit coming up that we're starting to talk about there, our Snake Oil Summit. We have training tomorrow that still has open spots if you're looking for high quality. I almost said low quality, high cost. I swear to you, I did. High quality, low cost.
No, I know.
Training.
I know where you go to find that training.
I can point you in a couple different places. So y'all have heard enough from me. Let's hear from better folks than I am. Take it away.
All right, I'll share the screen out here. Let's see.
Do this. Super exciting.
Should be in screen mode there. No?
Yep. Looks amazing. Looks amazing.
Awesome. All right. So me and Amanda are here today, leveling up. We'll go through. We already did intros. Anything you want to add, Amanda?
I think he covered everything.
Yeah, I think he did too.
Yeah, I'm at a loss kind of to add anything additional.
All right, so we're going to go through a roadmap to leveling up. We're going to go through some tabletop incident response overview. This is going to be just some basic level set of the incident response framework for those that are newer or aren't even in cybersecurity. We'll go through some playbook concepts, and then we'll go through the gamification. We have a little mini demo. We'll go through some tabletops and try to get some audience participation. I believe people can chat back with us or throw them in the questions. We'll figure that out when we get there. If not, it will be Amanda, making the decisions here.
So yeah, we're gonna do just a quick overview of incident response. I didn't get a chance to jump in here earlier to see if there's been a whole lot of talks about incident response yet, but there are people that cover it way better than we do, because incident response could be, an entire week's worth of training if you really, really want to get into it. But we're just going to cover kind of the basics. NIST has the incident response framework. What we try and do is when we create tabletops and tabletop exercises and playbooks is do as best of a job as we can to tie it back to this framework. Frameworks are for a reason, and you need to be able to test out each section of that, right, with a playbook and with a tabletop. So things like preparation. We'll add things in tabletops like, if you have the right contact information, or do you have the right documentation around the call chain? Do you have, maybe your incident reporting mechanism is down, like all of that kind of stuff that references the preparation prior to any kind of incident. Those are the things that I think a lot of people tend to kind of gloss over, because if you haven't had an incident that impacts a certain part of the business, maybe you don't think that you need those things. So we find that a lot of walkthroughs on this kind of stuff makes people realize that they don't have processes and procedures or anything around that phase of the IR framework. The second is detection and analysis. We'll go a little bit more into that later on this hour. And it's what I enjoy doing is the detection part. I mean, the last talk I caught the tail end of. He was talking a whole lot about detections around the Azure tokens and stuff, which that is fantastic. So I like that. I like that portion. But those are things that also need tested out and made sure that you can detect on the things that are very important to you, and you know what they mean when you do detect them. So we'll go over some examples of those kind of playbooks and what we recommend that you do to kind of at least initially start those kind of playbooks. And then the fun part usually of IR tabletops is the containment, eradication, and recovery. Especially when we talk about the gamification of it, it can get real crazy real fast if you just keep on failing your actions on trying to identify a device to get it off the network, right? So I've been in IR situations where people can't necessarily find the endpoint that's causing issues. So we tend to bring in some real life scenarios, right, when we're doing those kind of tabletop things, which we definitely recommend everyone does, right? You can pull in any IR that you've seen or that has been in the news or whatever and use that internally. And usually the bulk of the information that comes through those is in this stage. And then we'll go through tying stuff to the post-incident activity. So just like you would do in a regular IR, you would follow up, you would, come out with action items on how to make things better. You do the same thing in tabletops and playbooks when you go through them. There should always be a iteration, every single time you go through these things to make it better, whether it's a real incident or not. You're just going to continue. It's a process, right? It's not if this stuff was easy to fix, we'd all be out of jobs. So we try and tie all of this into the different scenarios and different steps in the scenarios, and kind of map it out, and it kind of gives this holistic picture of what you could do with playbooks and tabletops.
So we want to make sure that again, when we're going through these tabletops, tying our instant response framework to these, getting into that, as Amanda said, that iterative process to keep going through and always tying what you're doing and breaking up your steps, and it kind of becomes second nature, because when you're in that crazy instant response scenario in real life, you kind of want it to just kind of go through like kind of second nature here. So going through what is a tabletop exercise. Some people are very familiar with tabletop exercises. A lot of people that we work with have never really participated, or they may have heard of a tabletop exercise but have not participated in, and many have not run a tabletop exercise. Full tabletop exercises, or what you would consider just a tabletop exercise, is a very long process. We recommend doing like a smaller 1 hour, kind of 45-minute tabletop process. We call it, kind of like a tabletop in a box kind of thing. So we want discussion-based sessions, right, where everything can be informal, kind of more of a classroom setting. And we want to discuss like what happens during an emergency for a specific situation. Tabletops can be non-cyber related. They could be just really anything you want to better a process with. A lot of law enforcement, military conduct tabletop exercises historically, but you could do it really for anything, even just a business process that you want to see if it will break down at some point. So we try to always have just this definition so everyone kind of remembers that we're really just trying to get everyone together, have discussion, have communication, and figure out what we're supposed to do during a specific situation. So we have some goals and objectives here. So as much as we're taught not to just read out slides and read the specific words out, we do want to read out the scenario loud and clear, and that just kind of gets everyone in the zone there. And you want to break it into meaningful learning points. A lot of scenarios there's a lot of stuff going on. You want to break it down to what you want to focus on. Even though in a real situation there could be 6 different things going on, you want to break it down so you really have a meaningful discussion and action items focused on a specific point. And that goes into having like what we recommend, a discussion page. That will facilitate the conversation, help kind of move things around. We recommend putting those items in the categories of your instant response framework. It helps people understand really what is detection analysis versus containment and eradication. What's the difference? Where does recovery play in? And there could be a lot of interesting discussions to get everyone very familiar with how all those processes and where they're categorized at. So again, as we said, the overall kind of mission statement, if you will, of the tabletop exercise, the objective is, again, just to have a productive, engaging conversation. We have some do's and don'ts. You want to have one person facilitate. You don't want to have multiple people facilitating. You want to hopefully rotate that person in. It's kind of an interesting role to play. You do want to make sure that at some point in time, other business units are involved. We want to expand your tabletop. You might not do it right away, but you want to maybe start with your internal team, maybe get some other people within the technology division, and then branch it out from there. And sometimes the participants don't have to be actively engaged. They might just be listening on. And how are things working? Maybe you tailor that specific tabletop more if you start to include legal or HR to something that kind of happens where they're included. And that's why you want to break them up into smaller learning points or smaller sessions instead of having someone sit there and listen for 4 hours and kind of glaze over. You need somebody to keep track, so kind of like keep track of the discussion, what's going on. So again, just a recommendation from us. And then there's the don'ts. You don't want to stray from the scope. A lot of people will start to play the what if game. they'll start to say, well, this could happen, this would never happen. And you just want to stay away from that and really focus on that. You never want to forget to complete your, after action report. That's what an AAR is. And that's what we were talking about for the post-incident report. And we have some recommendations of what that looks like. I don't think we're going to go too far into them today, but we do have them available on our GitHub, which we'll share. And you really just want to make sure that's consistent. Use ours as a template. Really, it's just about just getting it down on paper and making sure that you're following up with things and that there's some action items and there's some, somewhat management behind the whole process there. And then just don't be that person, right? That just really, really, difficult and matter of fact person. I don't know if Amanda has any examples of those people. She seems to run into them a lot. I don't know.
Yeah.
What's up with that?
I don't know. It's our industry. Yeah, you don't want to be. A lot of people call it devil's advocate, right? You don't want to do that to the point where it's causing disruption of the entire process. There's usually varying levels of, technological knowledge in all of these. And the idea is it's not just for documentation, but it's a learning process also. So you never know what's going to happen, right? You can't come and be just this contrarian, like, oh, well, that'll never happen to me. We get a lot of questions too of what happens when you do run into those people in your tabletops. And the best thing to kind of start out with seems to work well that I've seen is start out with your own stuff. So target yourself first. And be a good example. So, whatever the first, say you run the email server, or say you, you're part of compliance, go that route first. If somebody is going to be kind of that aggressive, always right person, because it can really help to kind of show, well, yeah, no, I don't think this could go wrong, but let's see what we do if it does. So that's a fairly common thing that tends to happen.
Yep. And another thing that I've done in some places that really haven't done a lot of tabletops or have some good processes around things is just really start with communication. So literally have the tabletop focus on just communication, knowing who to contact when, system owners, business owners, when you have to do emergency patching, and really just leave it at that. Not even the actual technical incident at all. It's just about communication. Or just inventory management, as we were talking about earlier when Amanda mentioned a lot of people don't know where some of the assets are, and it's always those assets that might have an issue. But just some lessons learned there for us. So we're going to tie this into playbooks. We're going to kind of go right from the basic incident response, really quick overview incident or tabletops, and then going into playbooks, tying them together, and then really get into that gamification. So we really have to fly through some of this stuff. So kind of going through how many people, and I know we can't really interact too much, but maybe some thumbs up, thumbs up. How many people know exactly what that's doing there? It is a Splunk query.
I mean, I used to write Splunk queries, and I'd have to see the data.
I mean, it looks pretty. It looks pretty clear to me. I mean,
yes, yeah, for sure.
So, just like into the matrix with the queries, and so going on to what about that? Maybe a little more readable, maybe not. I don't know. This is a KQL query here. I don't know. Seem like what's going on, Amanda?
I mean, I could figure it out eventually.
Of course you could. Of course you could. Well, they don't make any sense.
There's like a JSON parse and a JSON parse and a JSON parse, so there's definitely really, really gross data in whatever that was looking at.
Yeah, I don't know. It's so again, going through, we're doing a lot of queries. We're doing a lot of query runs, going through, connecting all the datas. Maybe disparate systems have all their own syntax and language. Some things might be doing their own. You might have Splunk, you might have, Azure Sentinel, you might have HP ArcSight, you might have Blumira, you might have, 6 different tools. You might just be parsing Windows event logs, manually. So really going into what is a playbook, right? So, just at the high level, trying to have some workflows on things. I know we just showed you some technical queries here, and now there's a flow chart in front of you, but really just trying to flow chart from a process perspective, what goes on. This is obviously a very, very basic, response to the phishing playbook, right? But think about all your other. We talked about the last speaker was talking about, token theft within Azure, and all that stuff happening and all kinds of things. What's your playbook around that? There's a lot of stuff that can happen. What's your basic stuff going on? Where are the decision points? This will not only help management understand kind of what's going on or that something's going on other than just a bunch of queries running around, but also will give new employees and potentially other staff some type of understanding of what's going on. And you're not going to build out the playbook probably for every possible scenario. You might have a generalized playbook that's just a basic, this is kind of our catch-all, what we do to investigate, and it will help out. When you get deeper though into a playbook past the workflow, you'll get into something a little bit more, a little more documentation here. And it doesn't mean that you need to have a 100 or 50-page SOP, standard operating procedure on every possible security scenario, but you might want to have something, right? So you might have the, there you see there's a whole thing on the top there that kind of says it's an IDS, HF. Some places use high fidelity to know that this is like definitely when this kicks off or this runs, it is, very, very high fidelity. And then it kind of has that this is a malware bot C2. And you can kind of just, even within the title, know what's going on there. There's a versioning numbers there that probably means something, depending on how large your enterprise is. But even from the smallest perspective, this might be helpful. Knowing that there's an objective statement there, just a simple sentence is what's going on. And then that working string, where that's the, either some type of pseudocode or maybe the actual script or queries in there. Like we saw that Splunk query and we saw the Azure Sentinel query there. And then what's the action, right? That might link to other documentation. It might have some information there. And then, how do you analyze it and some guidelines there? Not going to go through it all. And then some reference information. This is obviously an example of Cisco back in the day, way, way back in the day, but it's still a good example of just some basic documentation on a playbook, on more of a technical playbook on what's going on. Now, when you go to response playbooks, they'll get a lot bigger, more into communication, again, preparation, communication, and how you containment. What's your containment tooling? You might have endpoint technology, you might have network quarantine capabilities, you might have a specific VLAN. All those things, it's good to have a containment playbook and kind of what your capabilities ultimately are. A really good book out there is Security Operation Playbooks. It's Jeff Bollinger, so kind of a shout out. Really good book there. They kind of go through where there's no one way to do a specific playbook methodology, but there's techniques for it. So good thing to kind of research. I know Microsoft has some playbooks out there. They've been getting a little bit better on their recommendations, especially in their secret decoder ring of what's logged or not logged. So that's really fun to understand. And then there are more detailed ones. I'll let Amanda kind of go into this masterpiece here.
Yeah, so this is another tool that you could use for at least your decision trees around troubleshooting certain issues. We use a tool sometimes called Xmind to at least create the skeleton of the beginnings of a playbook. It gives you the ability to kind of copy and paste and move things around, and just like a mind map related format. So you just like with the last two, it depends on your organization. It depends on what you're using it for, how detailed you want to be, if it's going to be just a SOC playbook or if it's going to be an entire incident. It really just depends. There's just a lot of different options out there for you. I put the links to Jeff's slides and his book in Discord. And I'll keep pasting stuff in there too from our different slides. And then another thing that I know colleagues of mine have been looking into recently and is very interesting is people have started to use different AI related tools, so like ChatGPT, Bard, whatever, to help out with incidents. So it's very interesting to see kind of where that's going, and what information you can kind of feed those and get recommendations back on. So that's kind of a interestingly slippery slope.
Man, we went 25 minutes until AI ChatGPT was mentioned.
Yeah, drink.
Yeah.
That's the new cyber, I think.
So going through the tabletop playbook use case example. So we have our tabletops and we have our playbooks, and putting them together is really kind of the roadmap of leveling up at least level 1 to level 2 on really trying to maintain your playbooks but also enhance your playbooks. And so, once you start kind of either using your tabletops to build out maybe some of your playbooks, or you already have some playbooks and documentation and you want to enhance that, that's when you start tying them together. So we have, again, this is a business email compromise tabletop. Kind of read it out real quick here. So Cody receives an email directing him to update his password, in Mash Incorporated, financial service website. So yeah, basic thing. And clicking the email, he enters credentials, update the password, everything seems fine. Then all of a sudden, there was a large authorization executed under his account he had no recollection of. So that's kind of scary. Turns out, again, go figure, the link directed him to an evil twin website. Malicious actor was able to compromise credentials, again, resulting in some type of authorization charge, right? So basic business email compromise. This is already, certain either detections or, awareness is kind of controls have degraded or failed. So what do you do now? So, again, everyone could shout out a bunch of stuff, and I can hear all of the responses in the ether of Zoom, just screaming at it's like when you see the person behind them in a movie, so you could do that. Even if you're in a small team, you could get all kinds of things you wanna respond with. That's where this discussion page comes into play, and that's where you want to say, hey, we don't have a playbook for this. Let's just do some discussion on this. What tools do we even have, right, to prevent all of this, right? We go through, does the vendor, does what you have already have additional controls that are in place, right?
Maybe you have something that you're paying for, which is pretty common, that doesn't have this configured.
Right.
A lot of times there's just like a lot of tool overlap, because you might not know that a software updated or added a new feature, and you can always go back and look at that stuff.
Right. So again, this might seem real basic questions, especially in a large enterprise, but then you'll get the reverse in a large enterprise. You might have 6 or 7 different tools that are competing with each other, that are, going all over the place, and it's hard for you to really do any analysis. You have a third party ripping emails out for this, but then another one that's, allow listing things, and then they're all kind of, fighting with each other. So those are things that just map out. Even a large organization can have some benefit in going through some of these. And we try to go through and have something through all of the, common attack vectors, right? So you have VC, will, have a ransomware one, and then you can get more advanced as well. Something like a rogue Azure application or some type of, credential theft and things like that. So you want to go through and talk through these things, right? Do you provide any awareness training? Maybe it's not getting, maybe it's just standard training across the board, and you need to maybe focus some additional training for those that have access to authorized large transactions. Again, a small additional step to a small set, hopefully small set of people that can increase your security posture. You go into obviously the multi-factor authentications, and again, more and more things. The last one's kind of my thing. I do have, how do you prevent or detect evil twin websites, right? And as developers, right, can you get your development more involved to put some tokens or some things in on your website? So if they're copied around, right, there's some interesting, I know, web canary, like web tokens you can kind of put in your websites. And if things are copying your websites, trying to scrape them out using something like the social engineering toolkit or, an equivalent, you can kind of, get some type of alert when it pops back up somewhere else. I've seen organizations do this, and they do get awareness of an attack that's staging themselves before they're fully built. And it's pretty cool to see an organization that has some of those detection capabilities that are very simple, and they actually detect a staged attack before it even happens. That's pretty cool stuff. That kind of gets me all, warm and fuzzy. So kind of going through, again, we got the tabletops, we got the instant response framework, and we got playbooks, right? We put them all together, times it with some gamification, and we have like all the power, like over 9,000 power. So that's what we're going to get into now. So this is everything has led us up to this. With this, we've been training for this right here. So we have a cyber game master bot overview. This is just an example of how you can do some gamification. Black Hills has their backdoors and breaches. You can incorporate that into your day in, day out tabletops. You can also start to make your own, get some dice, and start put a little bit of gamification in it. Just the most simple gamification can help go a long way. Get those people that either are really difficult to work with or always the matter of fact individuals, and get them a little bit engaged, and just, it's the dice's role that's deciding, but also get those people engaged that usually, may not be as interested. So we have, this is a screenshot here of our, cyber game bot, right? So we're rolling some things, going through, you have successes and you have failures. So we'll get through into like, how does that work? This is how you can gamify. You can take any one of those tabletops, go through, and in those discussion points, if you have something that someone wants to do or think they already have, or you want to develop, we have the under 10, again, roll for damage. The action fails. I know in some of our tabletops, we actually give people literally like cyber life points. So you can kind of go through and kind of make it a little more competitive there. 11 to 20, the action is a success. So again, just kind of, half and half. And again, using a 20-sided dice, if you're unfamiliar, they do exist. They're used for a lot of tabletop role-playing games. So definitely, I think Amanda has one right there. Always at her side, never leaves. Maybe.
I have a couple different things. I have like you can never like not have these at your desk, right? Because I have like this little one.
Oh, there you go.
I also have a pass fail. And it's kind of
there you go.
They're like attribution dice, but still.
There you go. 0 day. Yeah, so you can again, a lot of ways to provide just a slight gamification. Again, if you roll a 1, usually it's a critical fail. You can incorporate that into the tabletop. Usually something really bad would happen. Think about it.
Speaking of critical fails, there's great throwback in Discord to one of our trainings where there were 4 fails in a row, 3 of them being 1s.
Yes, we did have 3 1s in a row, which was pretty interesting.
You hope that never happens like in real life,
but sometimes you just have a bad day.
Yeah, right.
So think about an engineer normally just doing their thing. Again, mistype a command, and all of a sudden BGP is running wild and half the internet's down, because that's never happened. Um, but 20 rolling a critical hit, that will again kind of give a killing blow there. Unicorns will happen. You were on top of it, and you definitely made the day there for whatever action you were doing. Modifiers here, we have modifiers set up, and this encourages again documentation and training. So having slight modifiers, you could get really crazy with this. But then again, you'll probably be developing your own game, and you might want to put more of that effort into your cyber program. But definitely pretty interesting. There are a lot of other trainers out there that have some pretty unique setups and modifiers and how some of these can go through. I mean, Amanda are one of them. However, again, Backdoors and Breaches is a great resource. There are a few other cyber tabletop games. I know that FEMA or DHS just released one for state and local governments. It's kind of cool. Again, trying to get hip with the gamification. So check that out. Going on, this is some of our example actions. We allow we try to give everyone a base level of how to act, and this goes down kind of through some of the instant response processes, right? Like, you can always ask for additional information. We want to encourage people to always ask for more information. You might not have all the information, but you might be able to request it or see who might have it. So that's something we always encourage during our tabletops, especially our game. Again, detection of activity, basic stuff. Again, doing some type of containment and what that is. Obviously, going down the instant response framework, the recovery actions, and kind of going down to additional assistance. We want to also make people feel or get people a little bit out of their comfort zone with working with legal and management. So we really try to, in any of the tabletop, at some point, we try to get legal kind of incorporated there because it's an important part, especially with insurances, depending on any regulatory requirements. If your team and even outside your team understand that, you can do a lot of things during an incident or pre-incident to make sure that you're meeting those regulatory requirements, especially as they're changing, drastically, or know that there may be new regulatory requirements in how you respond to a certain incident. So people are checking and understanding that. And then, issue statement and PR. We always, in some of our longer tabletops, we try to get people to really actually put a statement, even if they're not PR, to get, at some point, we have to tell the public, and maybe you don't, depending on your, area of location or industry vertical, but you want to get comfortable. If that statement isn't to PR media, it might be to the executive or some type of internal briefing. And it's good to get people comfortable in issuing that and understanding, how those can be worded. So we have our gameplay tips here. We always try to get people to have our actions ready, and the game masters have final say. We usually do hand out special skills in some tabletops. Not going to get into those right now, so that's kind of a teaser. We do assign people titles during certain things. We're not going to do that in our demo here, but again, always try to use the instant response framework and take notes here. So we're going to kind of get into our first little gamified mini demo here. So, we'll try to either try to get the audience, through the chat, or Amanda's going to be our audience here.
Audience participation.
So we have, Ada and AppDev. And Klaus explained that the computer they use for dev testing for critical applications, the Whiz Bang 3000. This is an important application. All the money in the company is in this application. Has a splash page with a countdown timer, so that's not good. It was right after updating some patches for Mash Kitten on Rails, because all of the cool kids are using it. And Ada attempted to reboot, but again, the screen doesn't go away. The computer, of course, isn't an asset on file. Ada's been doing all the dev work on a non-company, non-corporate assets, but it was directly connected to the endpoint VLAN, no version control, 6 months of code lost, and the final sprints next week. What is Ada going to do? What do you?
Rewrite it all from memory.
So
there
we have,
oh, yeah,
we have
three.
four options. We have number one, again, investigate more. Maybe you're asking somebody. Maybe you're reaching out to a third party. You're just like, I need to tell somebody now. Or you're going to recode everything, or or ask for an extension, or is there an other one? So what do we? We'll try this and see if we can get some. Let's see. There's some chats. There's a chat in here, right, somewhere.
Sounds like an important life lesson learned by Ada.
Right.
Yes. Get pushed daily.
Let's see.
Oh, option one. Oh,
Yeah.
right. I think it's nobody likes my recode everything. I don't understand.
What do you see in there? I don't see.
I see a lot of ones. There's like 5
a lot of ones.
6 ones in a row.
6 ones in a row.
Nobody's gonna be a combo breaker.
Oh no. Okay.
Oh,
all right.
Yes, combo breaker. Let's see. 4, office space, the computer. Just chuck it out the window.
Office space. Are you looking into Discord? Where are you looking at?
I am looking in Discord. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, Amanda, you get to pick one.
I guess we're gonna go with one.
You're gonna go with one?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna escape out of the matrix here, and we're gonna go right into our Discord. This is just for show here, but Amanda will be rolling. Let's see it. Everyone give their. Oh, she's typing.
I'm typing.
Ooh, 11. Good job. Look at that. Did you have hopefully you had your investigative playbook, so you got super points there.
Always.
All right, so we're gonna go back into that. Let's see. Well, you found nothing no matter what.
No.
That was a dead end. No more investigations.
No logging.
Yeah.
No logging was turned. I mean, it wasn't an asset. So.
Nope. Yeah.
Somehow
so
we missed the agent.
Yep. So that failed. What are you gonna do now?
Number 3, I think.
Just recode everything. Ask for an extension. Is it 3? I got some thumbs up here. Are you gonna go for it?
All right, so we're gonna try and recode everything and ask for an extension. Let's see here.
Ooh, you failed.
She actually farmed
Ada
it out
failed.
to a third party, and
all right. Well,
she got the code on Fiverr.
Unfortunately, there was and that was your role for an additional workplace initiative. I should have let you know the values and culture that you were working at. It was a pretty cutthroat place. So let's see. Would you? Well, if the company goes under due to bad leadership, overcommitting the clients, but you find a happy company. Ada finds a happy company. If you would have reached out to a third party or law enforcement, you would have noticed that there was a decryptor, but you didn't ask for a lifeline.
I should have communicated better with my team.
Yeah. So that's kind of like, again, a mini demo. We love doing these all day, every day, because it's essentially tabletop RPGs with cyber in it. What's better than doing your cyber job than doing tabletop RPG dice rolls all day? So again, trying to reinforce that through that playbook creation. So we always want to kind of end with from a ransomware perspective, how do you build a playbook around that? Again, pretty, hopefully everyone on this webcast is here learning more and at least has some type of ransomware guidelines and plan out there. But that is important that, again, how do you validate certain things and packages before it? So this was kind of a ransomware through a supply chain or code build process. And you want to make sure you're not just using all these fancy, packages out there. You want to have some type of process. It is a give and take with the agility of all the DevOps stuff out there. But you also want to make sure that you're testing from secured machines, at least that's and also disclosing the incidents appropriately to third parties. Again, going through all this stuff, these are the questions. I'm not going to read them all out, but one thing to call out is, do you pay or not pay the ransom? I think I know what a lot of our suggestions would be, but you want to have some type of process documented and on file of what your decision is, because what you don't want to be in, you don't want to be in that situation where something like some type of code that ends up being really, really critical to a business application isn't there due to some type of ransom, and you saying that, well, we would never pay the ransom, and not having any designation on file or having any type of leadership, or if you are the leadership, having that already before you need to reiterate that, especially to legal. So definitely important to have that kind of on file. I know a lot of people out there that have opinions on ransomware stuff, have it documented somewhere, whatever your company's decision is. So that's kind of just a takeaway there.
Yeah, and you can't say that you for sure are never going to pay the ransom unless you're always acting alone. Sometimes you have a board to answer to. Sometimes you have stakeholder, like a whole bunch of different business level operations. Like, it would be nice to never pay the ransom, but it would be nice if we always had backups for everything. So poor Ada, maybe she pays the ransom out of her pocket.
Deep pockets there. So just wrapping up here, I know we have about 10 or so minutes, but we want to leave some questions. We went through the tabletop instant response overview. Again, we had to get that baseline about tabletops and instant response. We went through some playbook concepts. Again, this isn't a talk specifically on playbooks. There are a lot of good talks out there, especially probably at the Blue Team Summit for playbook creation. And then we wanted to really focus on gamification, kind of that mini demo on our game bots. Again, having those dice rolling, getting that, a little bit out of your comfort zone, and having those quick tabletops. We did 2 tabletops in this hour. We went through real fast here. But again, you can have a lot of participation and a lot of progress made doing these smaller tabletops versus a 4-hour, 2 days or 2 weeks tabletop. I know Amanda's done some really, really large tabletops for some really large companies, and I think they spanned a whole week, 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, I don't think anyone should ever start out with those. Yeah, very scoped down. If you're doing your first tabletop, do it with just your group first. Maybe a couple key people. Really, the first couple meetings could be just coming up with those discussion points, right? Sometimes that takes a full hour to come up with a good set of discussion points. So there's a lot that goes into building these. Sometimes there is a question here in Zoom. Sorry, I choked on water earlier and I feel like I'm dying. So is there a repository of sample playbooks that can be used as a starting place, especially ones that include sample detections and Sigma rule language? So I know we have a bunch of links that we can share, so we can put those in Discord. Do you have any off the top of your head other than the Microsoft ones?
So there is the Microsoft ones are pretty good, especially if you have Microsoft. If you don't, then it's obviously not too useful. But again, I think some of the general methodologies are pretty good from a response to basically phishing. or something like that, or count takeover. So you could still use those even if you're not, from a Microsoft perspective, you just want to be able to use the Microsoft components of it. But the basic, flow would be probably is pretty relevant to any account takeover in a directory system. The basic ones, which are just like workflows, I believe it's literally called incidentresponse.com, incidentresponse.com, and there's like a /playbooks. We have that link. We'll share it to you, share it with you. That's a good one. That one is like the 100th degree of flows. I mean, they have everything during like a specific incident response. They have like your threat vulnerability manager to do all these actions and things. So it is built for a full-on program, but you could kind of descope it down specifically. Now, tied to Sigma rules, that's great. I know that there are some, I would say, attack vectors that are tied to MITRE that then would have some Sigma rules. So if you were doing an account takeover and you wanted to tie that to, the MITRE for, initial compromise and go through that, you could probably map that out. I'm unaware of anything, and I'm sure there are a few things out there that kind of map that through to like a full playbook. But I know that there are a lot of stuff out there that we're finding all the time. So we can go through some of our documentation, see if anything that we currently have has been updated to include like Sigma rules or anything like that. Because that's a great question. That would make a lot of lives easier. If anyone wants to start some type of open source, crowdsource Sigma rule to MITRE to playbook, hit me or Amanda up. Amanda's all on board. I can see there.
I totally have enough time.
And we'll get started there. Kind of just a quick shout out. If you want to level up more, we do have training through Antisyphon. Our next training's the 7th, 8th. Check it out. We go through 2 days of this stuff and really get a lot more in depth. Have people create playbooks and things like that. So
there will be snake oil included in the training. Yeah, we'll make sure to include snake oil. ?
Yeah. So on the Q&A, I know we had one already answered there. I don't know if there are more in the Discord or the other chat apps. But I see Ian back. So
hi. I left my glasses downstairs because I went to get something to eat because I hadn't eaten yet. Yeah, no, I don't see any other questions. But folks, if you are in the Discord right now, jump in with your additional questions here, and we'll definitely get them answered. But so tell us what you said you're going to be doing something at the Snake Oil Summit as well, which we're just starting to tease and talk about.
Yeah, we're doing our full DDTTX, which is defense and detection tabletop exercise, which is 1 day. I always forget if it's 4 days or 2. 1 day of instruction on how to create your own tabletop program, like from beginning to end, as well as more in-depth playbook creation and IR exercises. And then the second part of it is just playing the game with everything we learned the first day.
Awesome. Very good. So for those who haven't heard yet, we're just starting to tease this idea. We're going to do another summit like this one. It is going to be called the Snake Oil Summit. And we're inviting folks to do talks and workshops and whatnot. But one of the specific focuses is all these things that people try and pitch you: blockchain, AI-powered ML, the Cuisinarts that do juicing via the cloud, all that. Let's talk about it. And let's bring in experts. Let's bring in people who are actually doing it right, and folks that don't necessarily think they're doing it right. And let's have a conversation and talk about, are these things actually snake oil? Or, do they have some legitimate viable purposes? So it's not going to be just, let's go dump on NFTs, though there will be that. It's going to be, hey, are there places where NFTs actually do have value? Is there a place where blockchain could be applied that could solve problems? And frankly, I'm one of those people who is like, oh, more crypto coins, but blockchain, when you really get down to it, does have some real world applications that could solve some problems. The issue with it is they are incredibly boring, and that's why no one uses it for that. So we're going to get into all that stuff. So keep an eye out in December. Keep an eye out as well for the call for papers and call for workshops. And why don't you talk about this this slide you got up here for additional wisdom or offers of gold?
Yeah, so if you want to contact us, these are our various things. I have too many social media accounts, so those are all mine up top. Because who doesn't need more Twitter/X whatever accounts?
Well, you gotta make sure you get enough excrements out there.
Right, exactly. Wait, what? No. Yeah, so this is how you can contact us if you have any questions or more volume. So I just switched my office around, and I'm like, you can see my mic. It is like this far away from my head.
Yeah, you got that whole like
I have no idea
joke thing from Mel Brooks going on there.
Right. I have no idea why it's so quiet now. So I have all the setup, but I don't know what I did. So I have to play around with it, but just
I know a guy
put your head
who's
really
listening
close
in who can definitely help you. Yeah.
Do I just talk really? I don't know.
No, that's kind of the way I have mine here. It's I like I eat it.
Yeah, I don't know.
I just use built-in speakers. I don't know how my voice sounds, but
I'm just gonna switch to using my AirPods. Like,
yeah.
heck with all this stuff attached to my desk. I'm just gonna.
The AirPods actually work terrifyingly well.
I know
for stuff like that. When I'm traveling and have to do something, I'm like, this is ridiculous.
I know.
All right, very good. So this is it for you guys, right? This is the end of the talk, correct?
This is the end.
Sir.
This is the end. This is the song that doesn't end.
Oh,
very good. So one, thank you for joining us for Blue Team Summit. Now, if you're over here in track 2, well, this is the end of your broadcast day. But Amanda and Jeremy, are you going to be over in the Discord in track 2 in case anyone does have any questions or things like that?
Of course.
Wonderful.
We will be there.
So yeah, for those of you listening, the 245 of you still with us, jump over into Discord, discord.gg/Antisyphon. Again, we are in the 2023 Summit section in track 2, Summit track 2. And hey, guess what? If you liked all this, join us for training tomorrow, Thursday and Friday. We have that low-cost, high-quality training. You can check it out on antisyphontraining.com. And of course, same place. Check that out for the Snake Oil Summit. We're looking forward to that because either feathers will be ruffled or lawsuits will happen, or lawsuits about feathers. I don't know yet. There might be snakes. There might be oil. They might be independent of each other.
It's the STS.
The
shit-talking summit.
Oh, I like that. I like that. What are we doing here? Well, nothing professional. I'll tell you that right now.
Costumes required.
Costumes always required. So that being said, again, Jeremy and Amanda, thank you for joining us. For the rest of you who aren't going to jump into Discord and ask questions, jump over to track 1. We will be having 2 more talks in track 1. James Beerley is going to be talking about managing the unmanageable, defending small businesses, small and medium businesses. And then right after that, we have a 50-minute talk from Joe Gray on social engineering your metrics. And that should also be interesting. So Jeremy and Amanda, if you want to drop out here, I'm going to, oh wait, do we have a question? Oh no. What? Oh, where to do the rules? Oh, I don't know. So with that said, thank you for your time. Everyone else over to track 1. And we'll see you again on another summit.
Bye.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah, I know we said we talked to the penguin. Tucks the penguin, not. What are you... Yeah, I know we said we talked to the penguin. Tucks the penguin, not. What are you still doing here? We don't have any more talks in track 2. You need to go over to track 1. We still got more great talks over in track 1, but you need to go over there. Check out the links. Go over to track 1 and check out the rest of our talks. Also, if you liked all this, hey, maybe you want to check out some training on Thursday and Friday. Low cost, high quality training, and we still got seats available. Just go to antisyphontraining.com. Find out more about what we got going on Thursday and Friday. But for right now, we're done in this track. Go to track 1. Hang out with us there. If you're already in the Discord, discord.gg/antisyphon, go into your August 2023 summits and check out track 1 in the channels there. So hopefully we'll see you there. That's for me. I got another show to do. Yeah, I know we said we talked to the penguin. Tucks the penguin, not. What are you still doing here? We don't have any more talks in track 2. You need to go over to track 1. We still got more great talks over in track 1, but you need to go over there. Check out the links. Go over to track 1 and check out the rest of our talks. Also, if you liked all this, hey, maybe you want to check out some training on Thursday and Friday. Low cost, high quality training, and we still got seats available. Just go to antisyphontraining.com. Find out more about what we got going on Thursday and Friday. But for right now, we're done in this track. Go to track 1. Hang out with us there. If you're already in the Discord, discord.gg/antisyphon, go into your August 2023 summits and check out track 1 in the channels there. So hopefully we'll see you there. That's for me. I got another show to do. Yeah, I know we said we talked to the penguin. Tucks the penguin, not. What are you still doing here? We don't have any more talks in track 2. You need to go over to track 1. We still got more great talks over in track 1, but you need to go over there. Check out the links. Go over to track 1 and check out the rest of our talks. Also, if you liked all this, hey, maybe you want to check out some training on Thursday and Friday. Low cost, high quality training, and we still got seats available. So go to antisyphontraining.com. Find out more about what we got going on Thursday and Friday. But for right now, we're done in this track. Go over to track 1. Hang out with us there. If you're already in the Discord, discord.gg/antisyphon, go into your August 2023 summits and check out track 1 in the channels there. So hopefully we'll see you there. As for me, I got another show to do.
E3s. Phishing fails. Yes. Closed tickets. Oh, failed password attempts. Honestly, that metric shouldn't be over 2 or 3, to be entirely honest.
Said we talked
IPs blocked. Yeah. These are all metrics that some manager somewhere.
What are you still doing here? We don't have any more talks in track 2. You need to go over to track 1. We still got more great talks over in track 1, but you need to go over there. Check out the links. Go over to track 1 and check out the rest of our talks. Also, if you liked all this, hey, maybe you want to check out some training on Thursday and Friday. Low cost, high quality training, and we still got seats
Some
available.
form of intelligence.
Go to antisyphontraining.com.
And
find out more about what
as we look at the
Thursday and Friday.
conversation
right
going
now,
from data.
We're done in this track. Go over to track 1. Hang out with us there. If you're already in the Discord, discord.gg/antisyphon, go into your August 2023 summits and check out track 1 in the channels there. So hopefully we'll see you there. As for me, I got another show to do. Yeah, I know we said we talked to the penguin. Tuck's the penguin, not... What are you still doing here? We don't have any more talks in track 2. You need to go over to track 1. We still got more great talks over in track 1, but you need to go over there. Check out the links. Go over to track 1 and check out the rest of our talks. Also, if you liked all this, hey, maybe you want to check out some training on Thursday and Friday. Low cost, high quality training, and we still got seats available. So go to antisyphontraining.com. Find out more about what we got going on Thursday and Friday. But for right now, we're done in this track. Go over to track 1. Hang out with us there. If you're already in the Discord, discord.gg/antisyphon, go into your August 2023 summits and check out track 1 in the channels there. So hopefully we'll see you there. As for me, I got another show to do. Yeah, I know we said we talked to the penguin. Tuck's the penguin, not... What are you still doing here? We don't have any more talks in track 2. You need to go over to track 1. We still got more great talks over in track 1, but you need to go over there. Check out the links. Go over to track 1 and check out the rest of our talks. Also, if you liked all this, hey, maybe you want to check out some training on Thursday and Friday. Low cost, high quality training, and we still got seats available. So go to antisyphontraining.com. Find out more about what we got going on Thursday and Friday. But for right now, we're done in this track. Go over to track 1. Hang out with us there. If you're already in the Discord, discord.gg/antisyphon, go into your August 2023 summits and check out track 1 in the channels there. So hopefully we'll see you there. As for me, I got another show to do. Yeah, I know we said we talked to the penguin. Tuck's the penguin, not... What are you still doing here? We don't have any more talks in track 2. You need to go over to track 1. We still got more great talks over in track 1, but you need to go over there. Check out the links. Go over to track 1 and check out the rest of our talks. Also, if you liked all this, hey, maybe you want to check out some training on Thursday and Friday. Low cost, high quality training, and we still got seats available. Just go to antisyphontraining.com. Find out more about what we got going on Thursday and Friday. But for right now, we're done in this track. Go to track 1. Hang out with us there. If you're already in the Discord, discord.gg/antisyphon, go into your August 2023 summits and check out track 1 in the channels there. So hopefully we'll see you there. As for me, I got another show to do. Yeah, I know we said we talked to the penguin. Tuck's the penguin, not... What are you still doing here? We don't have any more talks in track 2. You need to go over to track 1. We still got more great talks over in track 1, but you need to go over there. Check out the links. Go over to track 1 and check out the rest of our talks. Also, if you liked all this, hey, maybe you want to check out some training on Thursday and Friday. Low cost, high quality training, and we still got seats available. Just go to antisyphontraining.com. Find out more about what we got going on Thursday and Friday. But for right now, we're done in this track. Go to track 1. Hang out with us there. If you're already in the Discord, discord.gg/antisyphon, go into your August 2023 summits and check out track 1 in the channels there. So hopefully we'll see you there. As for me, I got another show to do. Yeah, I know we said we talked to the penguin. Tuck's the penguin, not... What are you still doing here? We don't have any more talks in track 2. You need to go over to track 1. We still got more great talks over in track 1, but you need to go over there. Check out the links. Go over to track 1 and check out the rest of our talks. Also, if you liked all this, hey, maybe you want to check out some training on Thursday and Friday. Low cost, high quality training, and we still got seats available. Just go to antisyphontraining.com. Find out more about what we got going on Thursday and Friday. But for right now, we're done in this track. Go to track 1. Hang out with us there. If you're already in the Discord, discord.gg/antisyphon, go into your August 2023 summits and check out track 1 in the channels there. So hopefully we'll see you there. As for me, I got another show to do. Yeah, I know we said we talked to the penguin. Tuck's the penguin, not... What are you still doing here? We don't have any more talks in track 2. You need to go over to track 1. We still got more great talks over in track 1, but you need to go over there. Check out the links. Go over to track 1 and check out the rest of our talks. Also, if you liked all this, hey, maybe you want to check out some training on Thursday and Friday. Low cost, high quality training, and we still got seats available. Just go to antisyphontraining.com. Find out more about what we got going on Thursday and Friday. But for right now, we're done in this track. Go to track 1. Hang out with us there. If you're already in the Discord, discord.gg/antisyphon, go into your August 2023 summits
and check out track 1 in the channels there. So hopefully we'll see you there. As for me, I got another show to do. Yeah, I know we said we talked to the penguin. Tuck's the penguin, not... What are you still doing here? We don't have any more talks in track 2. You need to go over to track 1. We still got more great talks over in track 1, but you need to go over there. Check out the links. Go over to track 1 and check out the rest of our talks. Also, if you liked all this, hey, maybe you want to check out some training on Thursday and Friday. Low cost, high quality training, and we still got seats available. Just go to antisyphontraining.com. Find out more about what we got going on Thursday and Friday. But for right now, we're done in this track. Go to track 1. Hang out with us there. If you're already in the Discord, discord.gg/antisyphon, go into your August 2023 summits and check out track 1 in the channels there. So hopefully we'll see you there. As for me, I got another show to do. Yeah, I know we said we talked to the penguin. Tuck's the penguin, not... What are you still doing here? We don't have any more talks in track 2. You need to go over to track 1. We still got more great talks over in track 1, but you need to go over there. Check out the links. Go over to track 1 and check out the rest of our talks. Also, if you liked all this, hey, maybe you want to check out some training on Thursday and Friday. Low cost, high quality training, and we still got seats available. Just go to antisyphontraining.com. Find out more about what we got going on Thursday and Friday. But for right now, we're done in this track. Go to track 1. Hang out with us there. If you're already in the Discord, discord.gg/antisyphon, go into your August 2023 summits and check out track 1 in the channels there. So hopefully we'll see you there. As for me, I got another show to do. Yeah, I know we said we talked to the penguin. Tuck's the penguin, not... What are you still doing here? We don't have any more talks in track 2. You need to go over to track 1. We still got more great talks over in track 1, but you need to go over there. Check out the links. Go over to track 1 and check out the rest of our talks. Also, if you liked all this, hey, maybe you want to check out some training on Thursday and Friday. Low cost, high quality training, and we still got seats available. Just go to antisyphontraining.com. Find out more about what we got going on Thursday and Friday. But for right now, we're done in this track. Go to track 1. Hang out with us there. If you're already in the Discord, discord.gg/antisyphon, go into your August 2023 summits and check out track 1 in the channels there. So hopefully we'll see you there. As for me, I got another show to do.